In the bone burial sanctum, the resentment aura of the decaying Dream's corpse spread out. Under the long-sleeve glove, the mechanized right arm opened slightly. The furnace was ignited, and the blessing flame from the ruler burned silently. Just like that, he looked down at the giant snake that had intruded in front of him. Huaisher smiled and asked, "Why are you looking for me?" "Sorry for bothering you. Goodbye." If Orochi had hands, he would have cupped his fists. The pair of large vertical pupils shrunk to a point in an instant, the forked tongue almost straightened. Then, the gigantic body that slithered out from the cracks in the human skin suddenly stopped, then began to shrink and retreat at twice the speed. Without any hesitation, reverse into the warehouse. This place is too dangerous. I'd better return to hell as soon as possible. He did not hesitate to go against the secret ritual and the army's contract. He was prepared to pay 3 times the price to return, even if he had to go back 2 cycles. "You're leaving just like that? What's the point? You're already here." The hospitable Miss Y, she urged him to stay. "At least have a meal before you leave." In the billowing darkness behind her, countless excited scarlet eyes appeared. The metallic light overlapped, and a greedy and ferocious aura spread out. It was already unbearably thirsty. Since someone had already ordered takeout, what was there to be polite about? "It's time to eat." In that instant, the serpent that had shrunk into a ball roared madly. It opened its mouth and spat out a purplish black mist, swallowing the figure like a tidal wave. But then, the poisonous tide was opened up. The sword that was raised high slashed down. With a step forward, it was already close at hand. Behind Huaisher, the rapidly spreading tide of poison began to shrink, as if it was being pulled inwards by an invisible giant mouth, into the sanctum of bones. Not a single drop was left. The sword was raised again, aimed at its head, and slashed down. Under the stimulation of death, the serpent hissed, opened its mouth, and pounced toward Huaiji. In the next moment, it was as if it was struck by lightning. Because resentment had already been slashed down, like a cannon, the rough shape of Tang bamboo tore through the air, almost turning into a blazing light. It left the rumbling behind, and had already slashed on the serpent's head. Like a hammer, the serpent that flew up was smashed to the ground. The hard scales on its head fell apart, and its flesh was cleanly cut to 2 sides. A deep chisel mark had been left on the skull that was as hard as iron and stone. Almost at that moment, it was split into 2 halves. Amidst the intense shock and pain, the giant serpent twitched crazily, wanting to escape. But in Huaisher's hand, the blade quietly turned around. His hands were lying horizontally, as if he was pushing something invisible. Forward! The blade was inserted into the serpent's huge mouth, cutting off its fangs. Then, without waiting for the serpent to react, it pressed forward step by step. It ran as fast as lightning. A huge crack bloomed from the right side of the huge mouth. As the blade pushed forward coldly, its body was almost thrown into 2 halves from the beginning to the end. The stinky blood gushed out like a tide, and then it was all swallowed by the bone burial sanctuary. For the first time, the incomparably huge serpent experienced the fear that its compatriots in Yuezhou felt when they were on the chopping board. Because of the sweeping tide of crows, countless iron wings spread out, and they couldn't wait to pounce out. Countless crows opened their mouths with an insatiable appetite. They cruelly pulled out the scales, coldly pecked at the flesh, and swallowed the blood without knowing when to stop. In the blink of an eye, the wound cut open by the blade exposed white bone. The giant serpent crazily rolled on the ground, spasming, and suddenly arched its body. It let out a long hiss, opened its mouth, and crazily swallowed. The stunned earth dragons didn't even have time to react before they let out a tragic cry. The fallen river master was extracting their lives, and through the contract, He was crazily stripping away their origin substance. All the earth dragons who had participated in the sacrifice were turned into dust, and the giant serpent from hell was rapidly expanding, truly becoming a huge creature. The wound quickly closed, and new scales blocked the iron crows from pecking at it. Fierce and fierce, it pounced at Huaishur without any regard for its own safety. A strike filled with hatred, but when Huaishur raised the blade, waiting for it to come to him, he saw the giant serpent make an incredible turn in its original position, rushing out diagonally and breaking through the wall. It slipped away. It spat out all the energy it had swallowed without any regard for the consequences. It was equivalent to 6 ascendants exploding in an instant, breaking through the secret ritual of encountering demons. At the same time, it was heavily injured by the chaotic origin substance. It fled to the outside world without any regard for the consequences. This was the sharp intuition of a wild beast, a survival method it had learned during its long life in hell. Now, it couldn't care less about the cover of the artificial hell, and had even abandoned the only way to return to hell. Even if it exposed its existence in the real world, it was still much safer than hiding in that haunted house. It had to escape. With a boom, the giant serpent broke through the wall and charged into the haunted house. The screams of tourists could be heard, but it didn't care about enjoying the sweet blood. Instead, it frantically wriggled along the corridor, fleeing downwards, impatiently embracing the light of freedom. It was only a sliver away from the door. Its movements came to an abrupt halt. An arm reached out from the crack in encountering demons, holding a blade and stabbing out. After piercing through the serpent's bones, it was nailed to the ground. Countless scarlet eyes opened on the blade of resentment. Darkness surged, and the sacred burial ground opened once more, pulling the giant serpent's body back inch by inch. The giant serpent hissed in fear, struggling, but its strength grew weaker and weaker. Its blood, origin substance, and even the hell's calamity hidden within its body were all rapidly flowing away along the blade. It was as if a soft drink had been inserted with a straw. It was difficult to stop the outflow. In the midst of the crows, its body began to shrink at an exaggerated rate. Soon it was only a dozen meters long, turning into a shriveled specimen of skin and bones, and no longer made any sound. There's actually leftovers. Can you guys not be picky with your food? Heat it up when we go back later and eat it all, understand? Just like that, the remaining body of the giant serpent was dragged by Huaishur with one hand, passing through the huge haunted house and moving backwards bit by bit, under everyone's dumbfounded and horrified gazes. Sorry to disturb. Everyone, please continue, please continue. The woman covered in blood dragged the snake's corpse, nodding and apologizing along the way, giving a sincere smile to the tourists who had their tour experience ruined. Gradually, she disappeared into the depths of the haunted house, never to be seen again. After circling around, Huaishur finally found Zhenshi, who had been abducted to a secluded corner. He had to admit that the earthly dragons had prepared a lot in advance. All the cameras along the way had been destroyed, which saved him a lot of effort. However, even though he was mentally prepared, he was still stunned when he saw Zhenshi. Bang! A low, muffled sound came. The lonely girl squatted beside the pool of blood, holding the Lord of the Flies upside down in her hand, holding the gun barrel as if she was holding a hammer. She raised her hand and smashed the head of the cross-dressing pervert, who was already twitching weakly on the ground. Another bang was heard, the crisp sound that made one's scalp numb spread out. In her coma, Mao's limbs twitched violently, and then she stopped moving. Is that so? She asked uneasily. Yes, that's right. Just aim here and smash twice more. Listen to me, you can't go wrong. This guy is pretending. How can sublimators die so easily? Beelzebub said excitedly. There's no reason to talk to this cross-dressing pervert who deceives girls. Just smash his head and be done with it. Huaishi's face twitched as she watched Jin. She pick up the Lord of the Flies and hit Mao on the head again. She couldn't help but feel pity. Don't
Miss
fight
Huaishi,
anymore.
you're finally
Even if
back.
he was a cross-dressing
When
pervert,
she heard the
he
footsteps
still had his
behind
own
her.
difficulties.
She
and
immediately
dignity.
turned
around nervously. After seeing who it was, she finally let out a sigh of relief. As if she had just been pardoned, she rushed forward and threw herself into her sister's arms. I'm so scared by myself. I'm so scared. If Senior Beelzebub didn't comfort me, I might have cried already. Stop rubbing, sister, stop rubbing. I'm scared. Huaishi's expression twitched. She lowered her head to look at Zhenxi's intoxicated expression as she took advantage of her. She didn't look scared at all. On the contrary, the one on the ground was about to cry. Not to mention the concussion. Who knows how many cracks in his skull already had. What did you do? Miss Huaishi, didn't you say you wanted to hit his limbs? But sublimators are really scary. It was my first time using a gun, and I couldn't hit him accurately. Then Senior Beelzebub told me to hit his head. I was afraid that one hit wasn't enough, so I hit him a few more times. No, you're the one who's scary. Beelzebub, what the hell did you teach her when I wasn't around? Looking at Zhenxi, who seemed to be trembling but was actually very excited, she felt that she had gained some strange attributes. She seemed to hear the voice of Level Up. She felt that even without Zhenxi could have done it with some effort. Was this the legendary protagonist style? And she was just a passing cheat, an old lady who was responsible for giving out treasures? Miss Huaishi started to doubt her life. Next was the survey of Nara Fantasyland's visitors. Just outside the haunted house, an unshaven uncle wearing a very warm and cute uniform was passionately interviewing the visitors, asking about the recent horror and curse haunted house experience. He was also giving out prizes. Please be honest with us. For the sake of better service, please. The staff sans enthusiasm and honesty made the visitors forget about their concerns and speak frankly. Actually, it's not bad overall. The setting of the puzzle, the part where we were chased by ghosts, and the little girl's help was really a stroke of genius. If we didn't analyze the background after we came out, we wouldn't have known that the Don't Come sign in the lobby was written by Kaori. What a kind child. I sincerely hope that she can become a Buddha. Among an intimate couple, a touched female visitor gave a good review. It's just that part was too exaggerated and caused everyone to fall out of character. The fashionable male tourist next to him said, in the inpatient department on the 4th floor, my girlfriend and I were trembling in fear when we suddenly saw a woman covered in blood in the corridor. She was dragging such a huge snake as she walked past. It was too exaggerated. How should I put it? I didn't feel anything at all. Instead, I felt like laughing. He paused for a moment and said with appreciation, but out of that part, the earthquake simulation is really amazing. I've never experienced it before. Please keep up the good work. What the hell is earthquake simulation? Mr. Staff was stunned for a long time. He felt that there were 100,000 question marks rising in his head. And a big snake? A woman covered in blood. What the hell are you talking about? Is there such a part in our haunted house setting? Before he could react, a middle-aged man wearing sunglasses next to him squeezed over and said enthusiastically, the overall experience is actually very good, but maybe because there's a girl in staff who's too beautiful, there's no sense of horror at all. By the way, brother, can you tell me the contact information of that girl? She's wearing a white dress covered in blood, and holding a katana in her hand. To be honest, I'm a talent scout. The first moment I saw that girl, I knew that she has the potential to be popular. Even if she doesn't have any acting skills, she can become a powerful idol. Huh. Mr. Staff finally couldn't help but look shocked. He couldn't believe it. Do we have such a person here? Stop it. There's no need to lie, even if you don't want to tell me. The talent scout said seriously, but I'll definitely come again tomorrow. If you don't get the contact information of that girl, I'll never give up. No, we don't have that kind of woman here. Don't be crazy. The middle-aged staff's expression was complicated. He wanted to say something, but stopped. He didn't know what to say. The one with the big snake. I know, it must be a hidden plot. The young man next to him said with regret, the seemingly simple haunted house actually has a hidden plot. Sigh, it's such a pity. I claim to be a deduction expert, but there are still clues that I haven't found. The others are okay, but the woman who tortured the body was really scary. The smoking middle-aged man said, he clearly looks thin and a little rustic, but he's holding something like a hammer in his hand. He's squatting in the aisle and smashing a person's head with a burnt body. It's too violent, the kind that makes loud banging sounds. When she heard my footsteps, she even turned around and smiled at me. Yes, I was really scared out of my wits. The woman with a strong Kansai accent joined in. If I didn't know it was fake, I would have called the police. Hey, what do you mean? There's no such staff. Wow, don't joke around. Hey, why is your face whiter than mine? Even if it's a joke, this is too much. In short, for some reason, although everyone gave a collective positive review, they always felt that their experience was very messy. Half an hour later, the middle-aged staff with a face full of doubt returned to the lounge with a pile of opinion forms and knocked on the door of the director's office. Oh, have the visitor opinion forms been sorted out? Sasaki-kun? Well, it's all here. Although some of the opinions are outrageous, everyone still gave a lot of good reviews. That's fast. The director nodded with appreciation. Although he's a newcomer and has no experience in this field, he's surprisingly capable. Director, you're flattering me. Country bumpkins are not afraid of hardship. Mr. Sasaki smiled a little embarrassedly. If it's physical work, please leave it to me. I'm still very confident in this. I have something to ask you later, but Sasaki-kun, you should also rest. Did you find a night job in other places? You have dark circles under your eyes. Take care of your body. The middle-aged man called Sasaki nodded again and again. Then the continuous work continued. He was busy until he got off work and got a thick stack of materials from the finance department. Sasaki, let's go for a drink after work. Oh, I have other work to do. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. He nodded and bowed with an embarrassed face, apologized to other colleagues, and then received the comments of really serious, and uncles are a bit rigid. Dragging his tired body, he walked out of the park looking at the dim yellow night. He couldn't help but feel tired. When passing by an ordinary family restaurant, he seemed to see a familiar figure. Sasaki froze for a moment, and his footsteps stopped. In the hall behind the window, he saw the back of a stunning figure. With her back to the window, she was chatting with the girl next to her. But even if he couldn't see her face, she must be a very eye-catching beauty, right? But if he had seen such a beautiful girl, there was no reason he couldn't remember her, right? Sasaki couldn't help but take a few more glances, and after laughing at his illusion of seeing a ghost, he walked to his current home, a dilapidated and dim rental house. I'm back, Zwido City. There's barbecued pork on sale in the supermarket today. I can cook ramen. He opened the door, and soon he smelled a strong smell of blood. Sasaki looked up in shock and saw his old friend panting on the chair and the huge wound on his chest. You're hurt. Who did this? Who else could it be? The blind swordsman smiled. helplessly. The frequency of the wrong murderer is getting faster and faster. Sasaki, we don't have much time left. Sasaki was silent. After a long time, he slowly nodded. Chapter 651. After dinner, Huaisher finally received a call from Hupe. What took you so long? I also have work to do, okay? I just met a very troublesome uncle and almost died. Hupe sighed, tiredly on the other side of the phone. Tell me, why can't my relatives give me any peace of mind? One after another, they're all like this. It's fine if they're dead, but the living are also thinking of ways to make trouble. The sound of a lighter was mixed in with his words. Hupe took a deep breath and sighed. The person you caught has been sent over. He's indeed from the Earth Dragon clan. And there's also evidence in his head that Shinichi Kurashiki was involved in Junshi's murder. But you went a little overboard, didn't you? That guy's head was smashed with at least a dozen cracks. Even if you're abusing a noob, isn't that a little overboard? It's a long story. Huaisher subconsciously glanced at Junshi. She immediately sat up straight, placed her hands in front of her knees, blinked her eyes, and looked very obedient. So, what do you plan to do next? Hupe asked. Huaisher thought for a while, and answered seriously, Of course I won't do anything. Huaisher. Hupe's tone became more and more tired. If someone told me that you've already cut a bloody path to my third uncle with a knife, then piled up a small mountain of heads, tied him up, poured gasoline on top, and planned to burn him, I would believe it. But I won't believe that a bastard like you won't do anything. At least we're in an employer-employee relationship. Can't you be a little more honest? You're so annoying, Hupe dear. Miss Huaisher laughed. When girls are honest with each other, shouldn't they take a shower together intimately, then have a pillow fight in their pajamas and finally lie in bed to talk about their favorite type, their relationship experiences, and the skincare products that are on sale recently, and then hug their best friend to sleep? Why, sure. Hupe flicked the ash from his cigarette and looked up at the dark sky. My stomach can't take it anymore. Can you please stop saying such disgusting things? Hupe sighed numbly. Take it as me begging you. Please don't ruin my beautiful impression of pure friendship between girls. You're so annoying, Hupe dear. Even if I hear you say that, I'll still be angry. Crack. The sound of the phone's casing being crushed could be heard. All right. I was just joking. Why are you being so serious? He's not even a sender. Huaisher raised just his head idiot and stared at the gradually darkening sky outside the window. The position of family has never had anything to do with third uncle's house. Now that he's doing needless to say, I'm afraid there's more or less someone pushing him. Amber rolled his eyes. If you act third rashly, is nothing you'll only give other people something to use against you. He's just a guy who's been pushed to the front of the maybe you'll really be labeled family representative as the scapegoat of a murderer and be punished by the heavens or something. This way, you'll have 2 fewer competitors. Who knows how happy the others will be? Then what do you think? Huaisher suddenly had a bold idea. He asked expectantly, If I let him know that I have evidence of him violating the living being's mercy order and even summoning hellish creatures in the current realm, and that I plan to hand it over to the Astronomy Society, will he act desperate tonight and spend money to find someone to kill me? Find someone with a lot of people. I'll cooperate and pretend to be seriously injured to give him some confidence. 100,000 question marks flew over from the other end of the phone. Hupe once again deeply felt and confirmed just how serious the problem in Huaisher's head was. What the hell? After finding the mastermind, he didn't want to quickly eliminate the root of the problem. Instead, he wanted to raise them like leeks and have them send people to kill him every few days. What are you planning? My happiness can't be bought with money, can it? Miss YG replied with a trembling voice. I'm happy that people come to kill me. The more the better. It's best if they're scum who committed crimes and can't be redeemed even with 10,000 deaths. More of them. Sister Gongba likes them. That's enough from you. Hoop aside. Let my third uncle off. That trash really doesn't have any other abilities other than having some brains in investing. I'm afraid that after he receives the news of the Earth Dragon army being wiped out, he'll just shrink in his woman's bed and tremble. That sounds really unreasonable. This kind of feeling of being unable to support a wall with mud. Who said it wasn't? Don't you guys have those kind of strong and powerful villains? The kind that won't give up and only want to get rid of a stumbling block, like me. As long as I don't die, they'll keep sending people to kill me. If there are, let me go and provoke them. When the time comes, I'll give you 30% of the reward. Is 30% too little? This can be discussed. Is there anything that can't be said between us good sisters? Crack. It was the sound of the phone breaking down even further. It seemed like Hupo's patience with him was really reaching its limit. That was why Hupo's stinky sister didn't learn any self-cultivation skills after going to Dongxia for so many years. She only cared about stealing other people's kills. It was too embarrassing. Huaisher sighed and said, Then help me prepare. He glanced at the girl beside him. Tomorrow night, Zhen, she will name Legion Bujing, and start a trial with the Imperial Chef Demon. What's the bet? Nothing. Even if he wins, he won't earn a single cent. But you can tell him what the consequences will be if he refuses. Why don't you tell him such a troublesome thing? I thought that since you guys are relatives, it'll be easier to tell him. Bang. He didn't know if the other party hung up or if another phone broke. In any case, it seemed like this matter was settled. Let's go. Huaisher wiped his mouth and stood up. We're going back. Late at night, in a quiet room, Huaisher opened the Cage of Dreams. Along with a flash of light, 9 huge iron ball-like things appeared on the ground, casually rolling around. It was unknown whether they had eaten too much or something else had happened. After eating the large snake that had gathered all of the Earth Dragon's origin substance, Sage Mark, and even the divinity of the fallen River Lord, the 9 rapping candle crows began to rapidly grow until they became like this. As they rapidly grew, bone-like iron crystals began to proliferate from their bodies, wrapping them from the inside out. In the end, they became metal balls that were half the height of a person. They looked heavy, but when one picked them up, they felt completely weightless. It was as if one was holding a balloon. After being forged by the Sunmaker, the power of Huaisher's sealing hand had deeply penetrated them. Although they had a certain amount of mass in their steel form, they also had the form of a mist-like origin substance. From a certain perspective, they did indeed have a part of the power that was quite similar to Huaisher's soul. This was also proof of the contract between the two sides. As an extension of the young arbiter of life, everything they had was given to them by Huaisher. But even Huaisher didn't expect this situation to happen. But according to the diagnostic procedures in the breeding manual given to him by the Ivory Tower, this seemed to be a manifestation of a deep transformation. After eating so many experience bags, they finally began to grow again. At present, there didn't seem to be too much of a problem. There was no need to panic at all, because the young arbiter of life's Sage Mark was still operating very stably, and after they entered this state, they even began to grow at a rate dozens of times faster than before. And now, the speed was getting faster and faster. The Sage Mark's destiny was growing. Without using any secret instruments or other precious materials, it could only mean that a large number of correction values or distortions related to the young arbiter of life were continuously appearing on Huaisher's body. The world was changing. Unfortunately, Huaisher did not think that hundreds or thousands of mature musicians would suddenly appear in her classroom in the ivory tower. She also did not think that one of her 2 students would suddenly be inspired to write an earth-shattering piece of music. When the piece was completed, the heavens would weep and the hell would weep, or something like that. This change was destined to have nothing to do with the correction values. In that case, it could only be the distortion brought about by the underworld. After such a long period of planting, watering, and waiting, it was finally time for this sapling to sprout. Huaisher held the slightly vibrating metal ball in his hand and waited nervously. It was as exciting as pulling out a box. He didn't know what kind of prize he would win. In particular, when a crack appeared on the metal ball, he became even more excited. These were all children that he had raised by himself. As a male mother, what was wrong with being excited? As the metal ball continued to vibrate, the internal weight began to rapidly increase. Obviously, the hellish creature that had turned into source matter was transforming back into a material form, increasing its mass and body bit by bit, pecking at the metal shell that bound it. Finally, in the sharp sound of metal rubbing against each other, it broke out of the shell. From within, steel birds bathed in the light of fire rose one after another. It was still dark, but it burned with pale flames as if it had been ignited, but there was no pain or discomfort. Instead, it looked very comfortable. The original candlestick disappeared, as if it had been integrated into the body. Then, huge metal wings spread out, and the sharp beak raised. Above the small head, countless fine steel fragments formed a structure that simulated the movement of the muscles. It opened its mouth and made a familiar sound. Holy! Chapter 652. When a crow began to chant, the other crows were destined to be restless. They all opened their mouths and shouted excitedly. The loud noise made Huaisher's ears hurt. Okay, it was confirmed. It was still the original recorder, but with 2 loudspeakers. Huaisher reached out, picked up one of them, and looked at it in confusion. He squeezed its neck, opened its wings, and pulled its claws to study it carefully. He couldn't feel the heat of the fire. It was a projection formed by the burning of the source substance, and it wouldn't really ignite anything. But in addition to the flames, its weight had increased by about 7 or 8 kilograms, and its body size was larger. But it didn't grow any tentacles or indescribable organs. It seemed that there wasn't much change, but the style was more and more similar to Cybertron. What the hell? I don't remember feeding you guys something as messy as the Tinder source. Just when Huaisher was at a loss, he felt a crisp sound coming from the bone burial sanctuary. It was as if an invisible eggshell had broken. In Huaisher's body, the bone burial sanctuary within the sacred mark suddenly opened. Rolling darkness ran through the veins of the sacred mark whether it was the head, the heart, the lungs, or the limbs, it was everywhere. In an instant, it covered his body from the inside out. In that darkness, the miracle that belonged to the young master of life grew vigorously, spread, and went deep into every place at an incredible speed until it completely merged with Huaishi's body from the soul, and they became a complete body. Huaishi had an illusion. Wherever the power of the sacred mark passed, his body quickly melted and evaporated
under the
like
control
snow under
of
the
young
sun,
Master Ming's
collapsing
holy
and
mark.
disintegrating.
The leader
In
of this
the end,
group was
Huaishi's
undoubtedly
body had disappeared
Huaishi
from this
himself.
world. Now,
What remained
the
was a
burning
pure
iron crows
and
in front of
flawless dark
Huaishi were
outline,
the first to
a
welcome the
container full of
transformation
quiet
in this
vitality,
large group of
a carrier
hell
of the sacred
through
mark.
Nibelungen.
This was an
Huaishi
illusion
gave them
when the body
the
gradually
sacred
merged
mark
with
derived
the soul
from his
and the
path of
sacred
heaven's
mark.
inquisition.
There was no
In
distinction
essence,
between them.
it was no
and they
different
became
from
a
the
part
way
of the
the
miracle.
destruction element
Huaishi
gave the
was
name to
quickly
hell creatures.
etherifying. From
In
this
just a few
point of
moments,
view, the
it was
progress
not
had soared to over
unreasonable
90%
for the celestial genealogy
Once the
to be
aetherification
called the
process
abyss
was completed,
genealogy.
a
It
portion
was
of those who
strange
had
place,
ascended would
really
be able to
strange.
completely
The
convert
moment
their
the candle
physical
crows
bodies
completed
into
their
origin
transformation
substance
and reached
then
the standard of an
reconstruct them.
independent
Although
large
there were
group,
limitations,
they officially had
they
the
could
title
still
of
repair
ghosts,
fatal
a
injuries.
blessing from the ruler.
It could be said that
the
he did
Sunmaker,
not have the
a disaster
weakness of an
miracle
ordinary
that
person.
merged with ghosts.
This terrifying rate
And
of progress
after
could only
recasting,
mean one thing.
they became the
Have
only
I become
native
a group
species
leader?
in the Twilight Village.
Huaishi was
the
in
crystallization
disbelief.
of creation
All of
that
a sudden,
symbolized the
he
existence
became the
of the
official
Sunmaker.
leader of the group.
The three
This was the
characteristics
only
of a
reasonable
large group
explanation.
were all
The
present.
moment the candle
If they could
crows
not become an
broke
official
out of their
large
shells,
group,
then it
young
would be
Arbiter
ridiculous.
Ming's
The
Hanger of
current
Destiny
change was
was
just
equivalent
completed.
to the
The
real estate
crows in the
bureau
cage
in
of
hell
dreams had
finally
officially getting the
become a
documents.
large army.
They had been
of hell.
officially recognized. But the problem is, it doesn't seem to have changed much. After the excitement, Huaisher pinched his chin and began to ponder. This group of burning iron crows only knew how to repeat holy word and shout that they were hungry. They wanted to eat. They wanted to watch porn. There was no change at all. On the contrary, they could eat more. It was not until they finished eating the remaining big snake during the day that they barely filled their stomachs. But now, Huaisher was squatting in front of the crows like an old aunt in a kindergarten. She had a kind smile on her face. "Little friend, do you have a lot to ask? Cough, cough. Do you have a lot of talents to show? Do you want to perform a show?" Of course not. The crows didn't understand what he was saying at all. They didn't know what a show was. A bunch of small heads looked at each other. After pondering for a long time, two of them stood out with their heads held high. They seemed to want to give Huaisher a show. Huaisher's eyes lit up and were full of expectation. When the first crow raised its head and opened its mouth, it actually made a sound other than holy word. Although it was very sharp and stuttering, it was enough to move Huaisher to tears. Then, in front of Huaisher, it suddenly shouted, "Name? Iti." Huaisher stared blankly. He heard the crow next to him continue, "Huaisher." "Gender?" the crow skillfully asked again. "Huaisher." The second crow's intelligence didn't seem to be very developed. It could only repeat these two words. Then the first crow asked again, "Age?" 18. But this question was answered very smoothly. Huaisher was so angry that his face turned green. "Why didn't you answer the previous question seriously?" He waved his hand to stop them from relaxing their traditional skills. Huaisher began to doubt his life. What kind of scourge did he raise? They even wanted to harm him. The man's heart was broken. He smoked numbly and began to consider a serious question. Why don't I kill them all and reforge them? I'll just pretend that I never saw these heartless bastards. But just as he was deep in thought, he saw the flames on the crow in front of him begin to change. It was just like the lizardman's rainbow-colored RGB light pollution, giving it enough special effects. But apart from that, there seemed to be something different. At first, it was a hollow white, then a deep red of resentment, a fiery red of anger, a green of compassion, a pitch black of pain, a gray of sorrow. In the end,
It actually began to emit a golden, holy light. As the flames changed, the origin substance equipment in Huaishi's body seemed to faintly resonate with them. Huaishi thought for a moment, then pulled out the virtuous sword and lightly stabbed at the first crow. There was no collision of steel, as he had expected. The virtuous sword was like an illusion as it sank into the crow's body. Immediately afterwards, the burning crows began to emit a holy light, as if they were trying to disperse the night. They were incomparably warm and pure. In his shock and astonishment, Huaishi finally discovered that their attributes and strength could change according to the origin substance he infused them with. They could even use the power of his origin substance weapons 100% of the time. In other words, in front of him were 9 axes of rage, 9 spears of compassion, 9 hammers of pain. They could even be mixed up according to Huaishi's orders, and their numbers could increase as Huaishi advanced. They had already become an extension of Huaishi's strength and soul. They were literally hellish creatures that belonged to Huaishi alone. Just thinking about this made Huaishi feel like her male mother's heart was about to melt. Was this what it meant to be a tool? Love, love. Just like that, Huaishi carefully studied the crows for an entire night. The next afternoon, he received a call from Hupe. HM. She had changed her number. Her original SIM card had probably been crushed as well, right? It's been arranged. Tonight, the first match, Hupe said in a monotonous tone. Hupe's voice was flat as he said, "Be careful. His cooking demon is a registered bartender. It's fine if you lose, but it's best if you don't get drunk and run around naked." The call ended. Huaishi stared at the number on his phone and smiled dotingly. "You people from Yingzhou just love to be arrogant. You're so awkward even when reminding me. Even though she's a stinky little sister, she's actually a little cute when she's so awkward." However, it was just a bartender. He didn't know why Hupe was so flustered. He pulled out his phone, opened the collection of 10,000 sins, and began to make a post. "May I ask what a bartender is? Waiting online. It's quite urgent." The first comment was, "Opie Xiaobing." The second comment was, "You ask me, but who the F*CK do I ask?" The third comment was, F*CK, your fishing party. The Astronomy Society's lackeys will die a horrible death. Therefore, the people in the collection of 10,000 sins really had no manners at all. Huaishi really liked this place. Without thinking or hesitation, Huaishi started to talk to him from the fourth comment. When he was about to reach the 200th comment, someone finally posted a link to the next day's news. E-level news. Detailed information about bartenders. The fee was 800 yuan, but the content was only a few hundred words. Huaishi finally had a rough idea of what a bartender was. Of course, this didn't stop him from talking to his friends on the third comment. He broke through the 400th comment. Today, the foul-mouthed members of the collection of 10,000 sins had increased. Congratulations, congratulations. Simply put, a bartender was a specialized cooking demon that had been verified by the Cooking Demon Competition's organizing committee. It was just like how some cooking demons were especially good at desserts, some liked noodles, and some liked to cook soups and dishes. A bartender was a cooking demon that specialized in mixing drinks. Although this was a bit of nonsense, the more important thing was that a cooking demon that could obtain this title was undoubtedly the existence with the most direct fighting power among its kind. Generally speaking, wanting to defeat an enemy through cooking was a fantasy. In a serious battle, who would give you so much free time to slowly boil the oil and stew the soup, and then obediently drink it after 2 hours? If you had that much time, you would have died hundreds of times already. Of course, many cooking demons were extremely strong and didn't need to use cooking skills to deal with their enemies. Just like the muscular guy with the Russian Federation's tattoos, Vladimir, in this cooking demon competition, With that kind of strength, anything could be turned into mud with a single punch. Not to mention, many cooking demons were good at other fighting techniques. For example, the beheading king of Jinling. Chapter 653. Most of the time, other than harming people, the services provided by the cooking demons were to slowly recuperate and heal the sublimated themselves through abyss cuisine. They could even use the cooking demons' food to change their physique and temporarily obtain some adaptability or overcome some shortcomings. It was said that in the past, there were seriously injured people who went to the cooking demons for help. Some cooking demons simply boiled a pot of water and threw the person in, sprinkling some seasoning. When the soup was ready, the person was almost healed. Although the person was cooked, it was still better than dying. Similarly, there were many ways to harm people, and it was not necessary to rely on the cooking demon skills. This profession was not directly related to one's combat power. In fact, the Hell Music Association was the same. Everyone was cultured, especially the disaster musicians, who walked the path of the upper class of the abyss. Those who were more developed easily had a lot of contact information of the crowns in their hands. Most problems could be solved by finding a place to ask for help, and the only ones who could directly use the cooking demon skills to cause harm to people were the bartenders. The reason was very simple. Compared to dishes, alcohol was very easy to carry, and it was not easy to spoil. Something that could be packed in a few bottles was definitely easier to carry than a lunchbox. The hell disaster refined and mixed by the cooking demons was placed in the alcohol, hidden in the copper bottle like a sealed demon. It was also very simple to use. There was no need to open the bottle, just throw it on the ground, and it was done. There was no need to eat. It only needed to have the most basic breathing for it to work. Using the evaporation characteristics of alcohol itself, after sufficiently intensifying the medium, it could even create an incense aura that could affect a large area. According to the immunity medicine swallowed in advance, it was easy to give a large-scale blessing or create a poisonous fog that was difficult to breathe, not to mention intensifying the medicinal alcohol on the spot for treatment, or using different curses, restraints, and guidance according to the alcohol they carried with them. It was simply an all-round support and output, and could be called a combat demon among the cooking demons. To be able to protect
After
oneself
pondering for
in
a
an
moment,
instantaneous
Weisher
and
took out his
ever-changing
original
battle
mobile phone
and to be able
adjusted
to
it to
calmly
border
observe the
communication,
situation
and made a
and make
call.
the most suitable
White
cocktail.
Mountain Pavilion.
It was not
Hello,
only a test of
Mr.
reflex
Longshan
speed,
Fong?
mentality,
How have you been?
experience, and courage,
everything
but
is
more
fine here.
importantly,
Thank you
talent.
for your concern.
A person with such
Well, it's
qualities,
nothing.
even
I just
if he
got
did
a
not
ticket.
become a cooking
It's good to
demon,
teach
would
students
have a bright
in the
future
ivory
in other
tower.
professions.
There's no need
to be
get
able to become
involved
a
in
registered
other things.
bartender certified
After
by the
a short
cooking
exchange of
demon
greetings, he
competition's
said,
organizing
although
committee.
it's a bit abrupt,
Such an opponent
I would
could
like
not
to
be
ask you about
underestimated.
what
You told me before. Yes, the date of release should be in the next few days, right? That's great. Is it convenient for you to spare some for me? Thank you very much then. What are you talking about? I'm only providing a tiny bit of information. I'll have to rely on the Daitengu's miraculous hands for the majority of the information. He nodded repeatedly and finally said, Then, please help me send it to Ingzhou. The address is in Nara. Motoko Kaori? Have you heard of it? Yes, I sold it to her. I didn't expect you to be so well informed. You're actually a rising star? That sounds amazing. Yes, it has something to do with me. After all, I'm just a student. I don't know about anything else. I'm just doing what a teacher can. After another exchange of greetings, he hung up the phone. Huaisher heaved a sigh of relief. He finally caught up with this wave. At the same time, he was pleasantly surprised that Motoko Kori's reputation was no longer limited to Nara. Even Mount Tingo, an important sacred ground in Ingzhou's culinary and demon world, had heard of her. Although it wasn't to the extent where everyone from Earth to Hell knew of her, she could be considered a little famous, right? Huaisher rubbed his chin and began to ponder. After the culinary demon tournament ended, he would go somewhere to get some correction points or distortion points. After completing this puppet, he could prepare for the great Si Ming's transformation ceremony. Shadow Burial's counterpart was Yang Sheng. Young Si Ming was supposed to symbolize growth, but his talent was to be buried in the sacred ground. On the other hand, Tianming was the reaper of death. What he possessed was the purest power. This kind of contradiction and contrast was really a little confusing. However, since he had already been arranged, he might as well be clear about it. Huaisher couldn't be bothered to think too much and immersed himself in the preparation for the culinary demon tournament. Time passed in a flash. In the blink of an eye, it was night time. It was still the familiar underground square and the familiar audience. On the high platform, after the minister behind the curtain recited the words that no one cared about, the bell rang. Huaisher finally met his opponent this time. The bartender, Alicia Francisco. She gave off a reassuring, serious look in the photo. After scrutinizing, she looked like Miss Motoko Kori with an unusually bright smile. She carried her toolbox and bypassed the table that was arranged for her. She went straight ahead and put down her toolbox opposite Huaisher's table. She didn't plan to leave. Meeting Huaisher's confused gaze, she smiled. I'm used to mixing drinks face-to-face with the customers. You don't mind if I disturb you, right? It's okay. I brought some good wine today. Huaisher shook his head, opened the ice-covered fresh-keeping box beside him, and took out an unlabeled sake bottle. The heavy gray wine bottle was filled with viscous wine. With a slight shake, it produced layers of ripples. Through the blurry glass surface, a vague illusion evolved. Even though it was sealed tightly, the moment it was seen, one could still smell the clear and cold fragrance of the wine. Alicia raised her eyebrows slightly, as if she hadn't expected such a development. Oh, you want to compete with the bartender with wine? She chuckled softly and didn't mock Huaisher for overestimating himself. She just reminded him, I've seen the competition a few days ago. Don't tell me it's still water cutting? I like a strong taste. If the alcohol content is too low, it can't satisfy a drunkard like me. Don't worry. I won't embarrass myself in front of an expert with mediocre skills. Huaisher shrugged indifferently. Besides, isn't it the bartender who laughs the happiest when hearing water cutting? If you do water cutting too much, you'll feel annoyed. Besides, there's no technical content. If you really want to mix water, there are countless ways. How can it be so simple? Alicia shook her head and looked around at the surrounding environment and the audience. She seemed helpless, although as a feminist, I don't like to perform this kind of gladiatorial performance with another woman. I can't help it. I've accepted the money. It doesn't matter. I won't lose when it comes to fist techniques. Miss Huaisher smiled and didn't care about this. He looked around his cooking table and looked down at Alicia's toolbox. However, can such a small box hold anything? It was true that the toolbox was already the size of a standard suitcase, but it was still too small for the requirements of a bartender. Not to mention how much wine it could hold, it was enough to fit an ice maker, not to mention other tools. Even if it was absolutely enough at ordinary times, it would be too arrogant to use it in a professional duel. Don't worry about this. This is a good thing I bought from the Clover workshop. Alicia smiled mysteriously. She raised her hand and knocked on the top of the box. The box unfolded on its own and lay flat on the ground. Immediately afterward, the two sections of the box were pieced together, and a huge oak cabinet slowly rose from the darkness. Huaishi's eyes nearly popped out of her head when she saw the 2-meter-tall heavy oak cabinet. Not to mention, there was also a workbench that extended out from the side, as well as a variety of instruments and hidden wine that appeared as the cabinet opened up. Within a few seconds, a standard wine cabinet and bartending workbench were placed in front of Huaishi. He was dumbfounded. He pointed to the box that was still spread on the ground and pointed to the workbench. Are you kidding? After all, he was a gold medal fighter of the Command Bureau and a hero who had been to hell. He was not a country bumpkin who had never seen anything. Besides, he also had similar things. But this kind of border relic that involved the scale of space, someone actually used it to make a wine cabinet and a bartending workbench. It was like a takeout in a private jet. It was too outrageous. Amazing, right? Alicia grinned proudly and patted her. But let me say it in advance. As a bartender, I still have my professionalism. I can't bear to poison a beauty like Miss Huaiji. Since you want to compete in wine, why don't we see who gets drunk first? For things like wine, it's best to do what you can. If you can't hold it, you have to tell me in advance. Don't worry, I will. Huaisha nodded. So, a dazzling array of tools was placed on the workbench in front of him. Huaisha had to admit that there were many things that he had never heard of, let alone seen. He finally felt the gap between the professionals. What is this spring? A tool for foaming in the bartending. Alicia replied kindly. What about this thing that looks like a shovel? It's for chiseling ice. I'm actually quite old-fashioned. I'm not used to the finished products in the ice machine. I always feel that it's too industrialized. There's no technical content, and it's not as fast as me. Then what is this thing that looks like a pistol? It's a gun. Alicia was silent for a moment awkwardly and stuffed the thing into the drawer below. I played with the target when I was drinking last time and forgot to put it back. Is it so wild to exercise after drinking? Huaisha was shocked and couldn't help but sigh. The entertainment in the archaeological team is really amazing. Elisha's movements paused for a moment. Chapter 654. There was a short silence, but it felt like an entire day had passed. Elisa's fingers only trembled slightly. Apart from her, no one else knew about Huaishi's whisper and the stormy waves that those words set off in her heart. She quickly calmed down. It's not good to pry into people's privacy, Miss Huaishi. Should I scold you? She leaned closer and said in a low voice, although it's not some unbearable past, where did you find out about it? I shouldn't have revealed anything. As she spoke, she raised her green eyes and stared into Huaishi's eyes. Darkness seemed to surge in his pupils, reflecting Miss Huaisher's face, not allowing any lies to appear. This was the gaze and questioning from the archaeological team, from a professional abyss explorer. If I said tomorrow news, you definitely wouldn't believe me. Huaisher sighed. If I tried to find out your true identity from tomorrow news, I would only be led to some strange organization at the border by those clues, right? It wasn't until just now that I realized that it was just a smoke bomb that you deliberately released. After all, the bartender was a strong enemy. Even someone as stingy as Huaisher could only grit his teeth and buy information about his opponent from Tomorrow News. B-level news. 10,000 US dollars for 1,000 words. It only supported one-time reading, but there were not many words. Elisa Francisco. Female, age 31. Where was she from? What had she done before? After obtaining the culinary demon's aptitude at the age of 26, she had carried out more than 4 abyss explorations until now. It added up to less than 200 words, and she was still charging for 1,000 words. And the content was empty and boring, without any meaning at all. Other than that, there was only a blurry profile photo full of suspicious points. There was nothing else. Huaisher shouldn't have been able to see anything. Unfortunately, she forgot to put away her pistol when she was showing off her new bag. Huaisher was too close to the workbench. He was so close that he could clearly see the characteristics of the pistol and the yellow and black climbing logo on the handle. In order to properly utilize the power, connections, and information created by Lucian, and at the same time limited to the internal members of the astronomical society. It could be said that there were many strong players there, and there was no lack of loners. Only the official members of the archaeological team were interested. They were fierce men who did not rely on the help of other teammates and headed to hell alone. There were no more than 50 importantly, people. All the members of the Extreme Club should be working members of the Astronomical Association's even though it looked like a club, it was actually a super elite hellish exploration. He looked at Eliza and mutual aid organization led by the presidents for registered members of the purpose of the Extreme Sports Club was to climb deeper into Eliza's expression. It was more like a platform for most of the elites just don't in the archaeological team. Since you can know this, you must have something to do with the club. Do me a favor and don't expose me. How about I let you have 1 round? 2 rounds. Huaisher raised 2 fingers without hesitation. Eliza shook her head decisively. 2 rounds is too much. 1 round is still possible to turn the tables. 2 rounds. You will lose anyway. You might as well expose me. Then forget it. Huaisher shook his head indifferently. Huh. Eliza was stunned. I said, forget it. Huaisher explained. Anyway, I didn't intend to use this to coerce you, but because of this, I'm very curious. He intimately enjoyed the wonderful atmosphere of being close to the blonde sister. He raised his head and looked behind Eliza at the middle-aged man with a pale face in the audience seat. Why did you find an employer like Li Ji Bujing? He has a lot of money. Eliza widened her eyes, raised her hand, and patted the cabinet next to her. In order to buy this thing, I owe a large loan. I need a generous customer to pay for me, but I'm now on a mandatory holiday, so I can't go to hell to eat. I can only live in the present world. That's it. Huaisher was stunned. With money, you can really do whatever you want, at least most of the time. Let me get the ugly words out of the way first. Even if you know so much, the money he gave is too much. I won't go easy on you no matter what. She paused for a moment and said seriously, but since we're both girls, I can let you lose with dignity. No matter when, it's completely okay to admit defeat. What a coincidence. I want to say that too. Huaisher smiled. Then, the chat should be over. Let's start. Huaisher slowly straightened up and distanced himself from the blonde sister. How do we compete? Didn't you bring wine? If you are really arrogant enough to compete with the bartender, then use the most traditional turn-based system. Each round, both sides will offer 1 cup. The person who falls first will admit defeat, and the one who stands can win. Eliza said, if there is a disagreement in the archaeological team, they usually come to me to solve it like this. Isn't it fair? Huaisha
I don't
shrugged,
care.
and then asked the last question. Then, who comes first and who drinks first? The way to solve this problem is more fair. Eliza showed a mysterious smile. With a twist of her wrist and a flick of her 5 fingers, an ancient gold coin with a faint curse jumped out like magic. It was flipping between her 5 fingers. The face of the skeleton on the front and the engraved complex spells on the back were constantly overlapping and changing. It was obviously a relic from the border. This was the solution given by Eliza, the simplest way. Guess the coin. Word or flower? Huaisha lowered his head and looked at the gold coin flipping in her hand. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Spend it. I like the shape of the skull. So, Eliza smiled, raised her thumb, and flicked it. In an instant, the gold coin rose into the air. It rose up in the dead silence. The golden brilliance rotated and reflected in the air, flashing between the eyes of the two. The coin rose to the highest point and rolled down. In Huaisha's eyes, Eliza's sly smile was reflected. At that moment, the big sister's palms suddenly raised up and fished out the coin in midair. No, it should be patted down. In a fleeting moment, she seized a glimmer of opportunity to finalize the outcome. Word on word, she won. If she really did win the gold coin. Indeed, the heavy and cold gold coin had already landed in her palm, but her palm was unable to press down and finalize this result. Instead, she felt the soft and slender fingers with a trace of coldness in her palm. Her palm was pressed against hers. Eliza's pupils shrank in shock, and she finally saw Miss Huaishi's movements clearly. At that moment, she didn't try to destroy her movements. Instead, she gently and quickly stuck in front of her palm. Just under the overlapping fingers and palms of the two, the gold coin stood upright in midair. It was tilting subtly with the changes in their muscles. It changed from pure luck to pure wrestling, but it seemed to become more fair. This was also something that made Eliza even more stunned. The other party's reflexes, speed, skills, and experience could actually catch up with her, an experienced archaeologist, and even faintly surpass her. The palms of the two collided and were in a stalemate in midair. It was like a competition of internal force in traditional martial arts novels. The huge force flowed between the flexible fulcrum formed by the wrist, palm, and fingers, forming a fragile balance. Every time their palms moved slightly, there was a sharp friction sound in the air. It was like the sound of invisible glass being rubbed. It made one's teeth ache. Then there was the sound of the balance collapsing. It came from Miss Huaishi's palm. She used the drummer's skills without hesitation. The force of her fingers at zero distance was enough to compete with the terrifying force of Chumo Sumo, not to mention overpowering the bartender's strength. First, the index finger pressed forward by 1 centimeter, then the ring finger, the thumb, and the little finger. The balance of the arm wrestling began to drift. Huaisha had the upper hand. The flower was above, and the word was below. He pressed Eliza's palm down inch by inch, until Eliza sighed, and suddenly retracted her hand, no longer wrestling with Huaisha. Ha! The dust settled. Huh. Huaisha frowned. You should still have the strength to fight back. Are you giving up just like that? Fingers are the bartender's life, not a tool used to wrestle with others. Accuracy and sensitivity are the most important things. It would be ridiculous to hurt your fingers before the competition. Eliza moved her 5 fingers, and her smile became more and more sly. Besides, I may not lose. At that moment, Huaisha's palm felt a strange touch. It was as if the surface of the gold coin pressed on the table was changing rapidly. The relief of the skull was disappearing quickly, and it was replaced by the incantation on the back. When he raised his hand, he saw the final result. There was a flower on the word. It was Eliza who won. Weisher suddenly smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that the outcome had been decided before the coin toss. From the beginning, she had made up her mind to cheat. So shameless? He chuckled in a low voice. This is the proof of going all out. Eliza raised her finger, dug out the gold coin embedded in the table, and tossed it in the air. In order to win from you, I have taken out all the despicable means of the gambler. Shouldn't you be happy? That's really an honor. Weisher shrugged. Eliza had returned to her workbench after taking off her coat and hanging it on the hook of the wine cabinet. The iconic white shirt and black vest inside were revealed. Her blonde hair was tied up behind her head, looking very capable. The bartender was preparing for work. The duel was about to begin. Chapter 655. Do you have any favorite wine? Behind the workbench, Eliza asked warmly, if it's from Ingzhou, it should be sake or whiskey, right? Or tequila. Dongsha's white wine is also fine. Please feel free to order. It's my treat today. Giving out free questions at this time. Isn't it obvious that you have bad intentions? Weisher knocked on the bar in front of him. I don't drink much when I mix, so you can make yourself at home. If you want, give me some wine with loneliness and heartache. Please don't take out this messy way of ordering wine again, okay? We don't have that kind of thing here. Eliza took out a bottle, pulled out the cork, and smelled it. She happily enjoyed the sweet taste. How about some rum? It can be mixed with happy water. After putting 2 slices of lemon, you will feel free. Although the place that originally felt very free will be miserable in the end, it's always right to enjoy the present. So casual? Weisher was dumbfounded. It's just a joke. The one who enjoys the present is me. She directly picked up the bottle of rum, drank a part of it, and then threw it aside. This was her freedom, and it had nothing to do with others. Enter the state. In this way, Eliza exhaled happily. She reached out and took out the base wine prepared for this competition from the deepest part of the cabinet. Her movements were swift. The bottles were piled up like a small mountain. Weisher's eyes widened. So exaggerated. It looks like a lot, but it's actually just seasoning. Just between her 5 fingers, strands of dark precipitation slowly emerged. Gray lines lit up from under her fingernails, and countless ferocious and malicious eyes intertwined in the darkness between her 5 fingers. That was the breath left by the existence above the abyss, the curse left by the king who ruled hell. The curse of the ruler? Weisher frowned. No wonder you were forced to take a vacation. What did you do to provoke a great god? It's just a little contribution. Don't worry about it. But this curse is very interesting. So I kept it. In less than a minute, a glass of scarlet wine was delivered to Weisher, and it turned into a pretty good work. Suitable aperitif. Eliza's fingertips bloody rotated the ounce glass, Miss Paper, and smoothly received Eliza's the clear wine. and studied his expression. And transparent in the blood-colored wine reverberated in the air, causing Vladimir to excitedly take off his sunglasses. The wonders and malice of the abyss emerged, making people shudder. Weisher asked when Weisher picked up the wine glass, the mellowness that he could perceive so what kind of bomb that it did not contain any in the glass. Then, once swallowed, she saw the consequences would not be much different from swallowing lava. The blood-like tomato juice was squeezed into the shaker pot and mixed with the vodka. That something was faintly mixing with the pungent smell of chili. Time passed by bit by bit. Then, lemon juice was not in a hurry. She just looked at Miss Paper's contemplative look. All kinds of spices after a long time, she reminded softly. In the end, the best a stalk of celery was mixed almost evenly, over. Even if you are a novice, you should be mentally prepared, right? Weisher sighed, picked up the wine glass, and took a sip. In an instant, he felt the unique sour and sweet taste of fresh tomatoes erupt in his mouth with the fragrance of spices, and it fell into his stomach like hot magma. Immediately afterward, Weisher felt that his vision turned black, and he suddenly couldn't breathe. He subconsciously held the table for support. He fell into a daze. What kind of curse is this? Even the decaying dream origin substance could not affect him. His strength, agility, and even endurance were shaved off by a large portion the moment he swallowed it. Almost 1/5. He didn't even know what happened. The weakness came so suddenly that he didn't even have time to resist. If this was a game, he even suspected that there was a game designer behind the scenes who suddenly adjusted his character's game values. He couldn't even feel the curse state. It was so sudden that the situation had reversed. Grief, I call it that. Eliza leaned on the bar, looked at Miss Paper's pale face, and explained considerately, "You have to be careful. The curse left by the dead ruler is to make all things wither with him, and it is inevitable to pass away. Once touched, life, stamina, and origin substance will quickly disappear. The Continuation Academy couldn't deal with it, so they could only seal it in my body. Don't worry, what you experience is just the product of the blending. It can't even be considered an aftershock. It is reflected in your body. Every time you touch it, it will probably deduct 1/5 of your existing life. This is just an illusion formed by the erosion of reality. After an hour, it will collapse." She paused for a moment, revealing a dangerous smile. "If you can persist in front of the table for an hour, victory will be yours." How much wine could a skilled bartender make in an hour? If it was Eliza at full power, she could make at least 60 cups. Every time his body touched it, 1/5 of his life was deducted. After an hour, Weisher's life would become the same as a paramecium. Not to mention continuing to drink, he probably wouldn't even have the strength to breathe. Not to mention the other disasters fused in the wine. Therefore, the number of contact must be reduced. In other words, Weisher lowered his head to look at the remaining half of the cup of wine. He instantly raised his head and drank it all. In one gulp, he drank it all. Immediately, the inexplicable weakness came again, and Weisher's stamina was drained again. Then he felt as if his stomach had been punched by someone. Everything in front of him turned dark, and his eyes were burned red by the explosion of alcohol. He felt that he had swallowed a cup of hot lava. Right now, that ball of viscous fire was burning in his stomach, constantly ravaging his lungs. Don't underestimate vodka. This pure alcohol mixture is flammable. Today, I have prepared the water of life, which is comparable to nitroglycerin, for you. Eliza looked at Weisher's red cheeks, couldn't help but reach out and pinch it. She sighed considerately. If you can't drink it, you can admit defeat at any time. He had already shown mercy to his opponent, Weisher. Otherwise, she didn't need to explain the principle of the curse. Of course, maybe this was also to bluff him, but Weisher couldn't find any way to break it for the time being. This was the most unsolvable and straightforward way of fighting. The weakening of his life force brought about a rapid decline in his resistance to alcohol. Eliza didn't even need to poison him. When Weischer's life force fell to 1/20th of the current level, he would be drunk to death in an instant, ushering in failure. In other words, he had to make her admit defeat before he fell. In the silence, Weischer slowly raised his head and took a deep breath. He looked up. "Next, it's my turn, right?" Miss She grinned and asked softly like a beast looking at an enemy. Being looked at like that, Eliza's breathing paused for a moment. Then Miss She picked up the sake in the box beside her and placed it on the bar counter. The glass and the solid wood rubbed against each other, making a low and crisp sound. "Sake, I haven't tasted it for a long time." Eliza sighed, but the sake itself, other than being cut, doesn't have any room to be processed, right? Moreover, if you just bought someone else's wine for me to drink, it can't be considered as a wine master's ability. Don't worry, this bottle of wine can be considered as one that I participated in brewing, and it's a work of painstaking effort. Weischer's thumb stroked the cork of the wine bottle, and his expression became nostalgic. The moment his thumb lifted the cork, a clear and mellow wine aroma gushed out from it like a waterfall, turning into an omnipresent tide that spread in all directions. Just like a light rain in early spring, it silently moistened every part of his surroundings. He could feel the joyous vitality in the air. Right now, that vitality was resonating with the paper in front of Arisa as if it came from the same source. Without a doubt, this was her masterpiece. To know Mountain's technique, that's amazing, Miss Huaiji. My impression of you has changed. Eliza was intoxicated by the fragrance of the wine. She opened her eyes and sighed solemnly. To be able to brew such an excellent wine, perhaps you are really an enemy that can defeat me. You flatter me. It's just a little work. Weischer smiled and took out the porcelain bottle of sake from the box beside him. He tilted the bottle and poured the wine into it, about 200 milliliters. When his palm swept across the clay stove, a flame had already risen vigorously from it. "Is this for warm-up?" Eliza nodded in understanding. "I usually like to drink cold, and it's not bad to drink warm sake once in a while." "It's not sake, it's a cocktail." Weischer corrected her. He raised his hand and pressed it on the porcelain bottle. Under the long glove, the steel arm cracked, and a faint flame appeared. Casting begin. The flame on the clay stove suddenly rose violently, almost engulfing the container and the porcelain bottle in it. The so-called warm-up was originally a way to drink sake after it was warmed up, but now this sudden burst of terrifying firepower was as if it was going to boil the entire Qingjiu. After it's completely boiled, the alcohol will be lost, and it won't taste good anymore. Stop it. As a person who loved wine, Eliza widened her eyes and reached out to stop, but she was stopped by Weischer's other hand. Miss Huaiji was smiling. "Don't worry, Mississippi," the woman said. "The modulation has just begun." Under her palm, in the dancing flame, the clear sake was quickly dyed scarlet. Like a burning flame, it was surging and fluctuating. Under the precise control of the alchemy fire, there was no loss of the alcohol composition, and the entire porcelain bottle had already ushered in a qualitative change under this water-refining alchemy. Time passed in a flash. When the expanding flame dissipated, Weischer raised 2 fingers and pulled the porcelain bottle out of the water. The water in the container didn't even have any heat rising. All the heat was concentrated in the liquor. When Weischer's fingers tilted, the blood-red liquor quietly flowed into the thumb-sized porcelain cup, rippling with light. It was like a melted gem. "Please use it, Miss Eliza." The exquisite porcelain cup was placed in front of her, and Motoko Huaiji said softly, "Special sake volcano." Chapter 656. A delicate porcelain cup was placed in front of Eliza. She reached out and picked it up. The wall of the cup was cold, and she couldn't feel any heat, but the dark red wine in the cup seemed to contain a terrifying heat which made her scalp tingle. In silence, she sighed softly. "To be honest, I thought you would delay the time." This was what Eliza didn't want to see the most. According to the rules, if both sides poured wine for each other in each round, Weischer could slack off in his own segment. What's wrong with mixing a cup of wine for half an hour? Can't he strive for perfection? As long as he delayed a little longer, the effect of death of wounds would be broken. However, Weischer's speed was faster than she had expected. Even in less than 2 minutes, the wine was poured, heated, and mixed in one go and came to her hand. It was like she couldn't wait to welcome the second round. Weischer shrugged and looked at her expression. "If I can't make you admit defeat in a fair and square way, you must have other means, right? You're so annoying, Miss Weischer. You make it sound like I'm cheating." Eliza smiled mysteriously, lowered her head, looked at the porcelain bottle in front of her and the wine cup beside Weischer, and asked curiously, "Why are there 2 cups? It's too boring to drink alone, isn't it? Drinking with guests is a unique expression of intimacy in Ingzhou." Miss Weischer held her cup in her hand and asked slyly, "Although it doesn't make sense, Miss Eliza, will you refuse?" "Of course not," Eliza replied calmly. "With such a beauty drinking with me, who will choose to refuse? No more nonsense." She picked up the wine cup in her hand and drank it. Then she felt the sharp pain of her skull cracking. Her body twitched involuntarily, her legs went soft, and she almost couldn't stand still. The palm holding the bar left a deep imprint in the solid wood. Pain. Intense pain burst forth from his skull, bringing with it an illusory force that seemed to have materialized. It was as if someone had placed an axe on his head. Immediately after, a terrifying pain spread through his body along with the wine that was just right warm. Everywhere it passed, all the coldness was dispelled, causing his entire body to become comfortably warm. What he swallowed was not a liquid, but a warm and fragrant mist. It was intoxicating, but at the same time, it was unbearable to endure the terrible pain of being chopped by the axe. Following the spread of the pain, an uncontrollable wave spread from the bottom of his heart. Eliza panted violently and supported herself on the bar counter. It caused the chest that had condensed into a substance to break and fell out of his body. Amidst her expression, silence, gradually became exclamations could be heard from the audience. Expression became all the cooking ferocious. Demons raised because their eyes in astonishment. The anger that seemed to have materialized behind the counter quickly spread throughout her body. "You're burning filling up her entire body." Weischer picked up his wine glass, with the pain, took a sip casually, and it rapidly expanded and being gradually in the fire, eroded her Miss soul. Eliza's burning appearance is really moving. That's right, Eliza was burning up. The rampaging origin substance was infected by her anger, and wisps of it seeped out of her pores and skin, turning into a scarlet glow that enveloped her. Across the bar counter, he could still feel the blazing heat. It was as if the lid of a furnace was opened. That was not Weischer's anger, but the anger that was originally hidden in Eliza's body. What Weischer did was at most sprinkle a spark of fire. Caught off guard, Eliza's anger was ignited from the inside out, causing her consciousness to shake instantly. She almost couldn't hold back and attacked the enemy in front of her. The sharp-hand knife stopped abruptly at the last moment. The 5 fingers that were entangled with the dark curse had a faint malevolence and curse. It was only a line away from Miss Weischer's pupils. At the last moment, she managed to control herself. She didn't break the rules of the culinary demon duel. Otherwise, Eliza would have instantly been sent out. You really have a lot of firepower. There must be someone who made you so angry. Huaisher sipped his wine nonchalantly and raised his finger. A wisp of condensed flame slowly rose from the tip of his finger. That was alcohol. The alcohol in Huaisher's body was being ignited by his anger, quickly being metabolized. Thanks to Daitenga's miraculous hands, this brand new bottle of sake perfectly merged with Huaisher's blood. The vitality that belonged to a mountain ghost flowed within. If one were to simply use it, it was indeed an incomparably precious high-quality wine. Not only could it heal hidden injuries and increase vitality, but it also tasted wonderful and intoxicating. To Huaisher, this was also a material that was hard to come by. Apart from this, there weren't many things that could contain his origin substance so perfectly. The anger in his origin substance equipment was merged into it, forming a specially tuned volcano. If it was a normal person, wouldn't they have been burned to ashes by this kind of anger and heat long ago? Eliza actually only lost control for a moment and almost punched herself. Her eyes were scarlet red. In the silence, Huaisher picked up the porcelain bottle and poured wine for her again. She hadn't even finished drinking. "Do you want to continue?" Huaisher asked. Eliza didn't reply. She silently picked up the wine cup and once again drank it in one gulp. Once again, the blazing flames appeared. Every time she drank, she would experience the pain of her skull being that shattered. Pain was simply too real, as if someone had really taken an axe and chopped off her neck, taking away her head. Under the sweet fragrance of the alcohol, her body burned with anger, and she slowly walked towards death. On the other hand, this didn't affect Huaisher at all. His own blood, his own origin substance, and his own wine. There was no reason that he would be poisoned to death after going out for a while. Instead, he used this opportunity to expel the alcohol that had accumulated in his body. He relied on the vitality of the plants in the wine to replenish his weak vitality. Even if it was only a temporary, illusory state, he still relied on drinking to recover close to his original range. As the saying went, the other went away. Huaisher had turned the tables. When Eliza put down the porcelain cup in her hand for the last time, she couldn't help but let out a long breath. After the blazing flames were extinguished, she slowly regained consciousness. The pain quickly left like an illusion. "I actually got drunk," she sighed softly. "More or less. Don't alcohol and anger make people lose control?" Huaisher asked, "Can you continue?" "Of course." Eliza took out a handkerchief from the pocket of her vest and wiped the sweat from her face, fingers, and neck. After changing the burnt hairband, she regained her capable and experienced posture. She casually grabbed a handful of ice cubes from the freezer beside her and threw them into her mouth, chewing with crunching sounds. Finally, she regained her tranquility under the stimulation of the cold. The remaining ice cubes were thrown into the mixing pot, and then the ounce cup was flipped over with her fingertips. Rum, vodka, bourbon, gin, brandy were thrown in like flowing water. Just like at the World Wine Exhibition, dozens of different liquors were mixed together in the snow flask. Then, the ruler's curse turned into a whirlpool, mixing all the chaotic materials. When they fell into the wine cup with ice cubes, they turned into a clear and fragrant liquid, and no bomb-like lethality could be seen. A can of happy water was pulled off, and as Eliza's palm tilted, it was mixed evenly in the wine cup. She simply drank the remaining half herself. The empty can was thrown into the trash can next to her, and a slice of cut lemon was thrown into the cup, adding a seductive sour taste to the bitterness of the alcohol and the sweetness of the drink. In the end, the wine with ice mist was placed in front of Huaisher. The sweet smell lingered at the tip of his nose. "This is the wine that loses my virginity." Huaisher looked up with a half-smile and asked his opponent curiously, "Does Miss Eliza have evil thoughts about me?" Although you are my type, my principle is to never make a move on the guests. So, unfortunately, we don't have the fate that the people of Ingzhou say. Eliza shrugged and approached with a smile. The second cup, Long Island iced tea, please, Miss Huai Shi. This was an extra-large cocktail that was directly placed in a beer glass. It was more than 3 times the weight of the Bloody Mary just now, not to mention the terrifying lethality contained in it. Obviously, she didn't give Huai Shi a chance to finish it in one gulp. Cocktails are something to be savored slowly. Eliza said happily, drinking in one gulp is too boring. You have to repeatedly taste the bartender's painstaking efforts and design. Unfortunately, I'm probably the kind of unwelcome guest. Ms. Huaiji shrugged, picked up the beer cup, raised her head, and opened her mouth. The muffled sound of water burst out from her throat. The beer cup was quickly tilted toward her open mouth. The oversized Long Island iced tea was poured directly into her stomach without swallowing. It was like filling a thermos. After she finished pouring the wine, Huai Shi put down the wine cup and burped right in front of her with a happy smile on her face. Eliza was also looking at him, smiling even more happily than Huai Shi. I was fooled. At that moment, a crimson color emerged from Huai Shi's body and spread quickly. Then, faint water vapor rose from her body. It was as if her whole body was shrouded in mist. Huai Shi widened his eyes in shock. His breathing was rapid. At this moment, he was sweating profusely, as the famous scumbag's happy wine. Even if Long Island iced tea tasted sweet and sour, it was essentially using the taste of happy water and lemon to cover up the internal alcohol content that was completely excessive, not to mention the terrible lethality of the human digestive system that was several times greater when different wines were mixed together. Drinking it in one gulp seemed to avoid the weakening of the curse of death, but it made Eliza's alcohol bomb completely explode from the inside of her body. Huai Shi froze in place, only feeling that his vision was quickly turning dark. Chapter 657. He opened his mouth subconsciously and wanted to spit it out, but he raised his hand to cover his mouth, clenched his teeth, and restrained the nausea surging in his chest. That was the body's instinctive rejection, but rejection wouldn't work. Sweat continued to flow, making Miss Huaiji's face gradually become wet. As his vitality plummeted again, Huai Shi felt that the alcohol content in his blood vessels began to soar, incomprehensible and unbelievable. Even this time, there wasn't even a transition phase at the beginning. Without warning, he directly entered a state of deep drunkenness. Until this time, Huai Shi discovered that the alcohol brought by Bloody Mary was not metabolized as he thought. Even after the alcohol of Long Island iced tea was injected, it reappeared. It directly skipped the initial tipsy stage, and he fell into an uncontrollable drunkenness. I still underestimated the bartender's skills. Eliza's alcohol couldn't be metabolized. Instead, it was like a stack of poison. It would increase with each round of drinking until the upper limit of the rapid decline of the tolerance could no longer resist the erosion of alcohol. Then, everything would be over. I've watched your previous matches. Your resistance is indeed very high, but this isn't something that can be ignored just because you can resist it. Eliza looked down at Huai Susie's embarrassed look and raised her eyebrows happily. After all, how to quickly get the guests drunk is the bartender's unique skill. Huai didn't respond. He was trying his best to resist the erosion of alcohol and the urge to fall asleep and faint. He had no time to talk. Eliza shook her head and sighed. She took out the iron box from her pocket. After opening it, she rummaged through the tobacco and cigarette paper. After skillfully rolling one out, she stuck out her tongue, licked the corner of the cigarette paper, and sealed it. "Do you want to smoke?" she asked casually in front of everyone. Huai didn't respond. Raised his saber, shook her head, turned the hilt, and sighed, and pointed it tilted at her head, and the main artery was after stabbed. Taking two puffs. Eliza's she took off the cigarette and stuffed it and into she the reached corner out to stop her. It was too sudden. The strong smell of tobacco why her opponent wanted to commit suicide when he couldn't win, but she instinctively didn't want to see blood on her workbench. It was only temporary. She also didn't want this opponent who made Eliza her so happy to die for such a reason, let alone holding on to the next round. The blade sank into Huai neck, right? It pierced from the left propped himself and came out from the right. In a short period there was no scene of blood splattering as expected, scrutinizing his opponent as if it was just a toy to scare people. He smiled faintly. It's not time to admit as if nothing had happened. Besides, his eyes gradually became clear, and he was recovering his sobriety. Gradually, smiled, he returned but before to normal. She finished speaking, indeed, she saw that alcohol in the blood hand couldn't be metabolized, knife so that was as it was better to just let the blood appeared. And alcohol the overlapping go. Feathers in this of the way, blade, countless blood with the sweet light. Fragrance it was so alcohol flowed along the resentment and flowed into the cage of dreams. Bit by bit, it was devoured by the crows. This excessive amount of alcohol, enough to intoxicate hundreds of people, was quickly drained from Huai body. Then, it flowed to the innocent crows. Next, young Master Ming's hematopoietic function was activated. The huge vitality from the mountain ghost surged and quickly turned into blood. Huai took a deep breath, took off the cigarette from the corner of his mouth, and flicked the ash. "Thank you for the cigarette." Eliza's expression was unreadable, going to the bathroom to vomit after getting drunk in the wine competition. "This is cheating, Miss Huai." "No, I'm just preparing the ingredients for today's last cocktail." Huai smiled slyly. "Besides, there's no rule that says you can't bleed yourself in the competition, right?" "Yes, these are the ingredients for today's last cocktail." Anyway, that's what he said. "As for the last cocktail, can I change the recipe at the last minute?" Casually, he pulled out the resentment that had been washed by the good wine and put away the blood. Huai other hand picked up the empty porcelain bottle again. After pouring in the sake again, he directly inserted it into the ice bucket. Then, the forging furnace was restarted. This time, what burst out was no longer high heat. On the contrary, countless chills were rapidly shrinking inward. The ice in the ice bucket melted at a speed visible to the naked eye. This was because the heat was being transferred from the porcelain bottle to the outside. It was still the water refinement in alchemy and the fluid transformation method in the foundry's skill. The essence of disaster from hell was injected into it. Soon, the bone-chilling gray sake was poured into Eliza's wine cup. "Special sake, Sang Ran." Huai smiled. "Let me give you a spoiler. This is a different feeling from anger. Be careful. Sang Ran." Eliza lowered her head and stared at the gloomy and heavy color in the glass. Her brows slowly raised. It was indeed the color of Sang Ran, It was just that this color was really sad. In a trance, she suddenly felt sad. No matter how thick her nerves were, Eliza was still a woman. The gentler her nature was, the easier it was to feel hurt. After this involuntary sigh, she finally reacted, but the glass in front of her was already empty. Only a trace of coldness went down her throat the moment she absent-mindedly drank. With the cold wine fragrance, even the flames of the whole world couldn't extinguish the coldness and loneliness. The chill was spreading. Her movements were stiff in place. As if she was frozen, it was difficult for her to breathe. She was so sad that she couldn't control herself. The past that she couldn't forget once again floated to her heart with this coldness, bringing heart-wrenching sadness and loneliness. She tried to raise her wrist with difficulty, but when her knuckles rubbed against each other, it made a sharp sound. It was difficult to move. It was even difficult to breathe, because she was bound from the inside out. In the broken, mournful sound, the projection in her soul emerged. A dark and illusory chain broke through her lungs and extended from her body. It penetrated the joints, bound the muscles, surrounded the lungs and internal organs, and finally converged on the heart that was beating hard. It gradually shrank inward. Sorrowful Locke, not caring that Eliza couldn't continue drinking, Huaisher drank one glass after another, tasting the sadness and loneliness that once belonged to him. For this kind of thing, just one glass was enough. Any more wouldn't have any effect. But loneliness and sadness to this extent, it was really unexpected. Huaisher lowered his eyes. Behind the bar counter in front of him, countless chains had pierced out of Eliza's body, binding her layer by layer. They multiplied and spread crazily, almost enveloping the entire arena. Boundless and tyrannical origin substance rippled outwards, making it hard for everyone to breathe. Huaisher, who was close at hand, couldn't bear the aftermath of the sadness. He could only rejoice from the bottom of his heart that he didn't fight to the death with such an opponent, but had a chef-demon duel. Otherwise, the one who lost and died would most likely be him, right? Huaisher had always known that Eliza was a powerhouse, but he didn't expect that she could be so strong. Even among Tier 4, there were very few people who could be comparable to her, right? As expected of the explorer, who won the Lone Wolf Medal, Ms. Eliza. Huaisher raised his head, drank the last drop of Sang Rance sake in the porcelain bottle, and sighed softly. This determination and this strength are really awe-inspiring. Bang! A shattering sound sounded. It was the wail of sadness on the countless chains, and the shackles of the sorrowful rope collapsed. In front of Eliza's raised eyes, an ocean-like torrent emerged from the emaciated body. The phantom of the skinny ferryman emerged from the torrent of the river Styx, looking down indifferently at the mortal world. In an instant, it disappeared without a trace with the rushing river Styx. Sharon. Roman genealogy. Tier 4. River Styx ferryman. Sharon. Eliza raised her eyes, took a deep breath, clenched her fists slightly, and the net of chains collapsed in an instant. Now, Huaisher could finally understand how she carried the ruler's curse, because this woman was really unreasonably strong. Just by relying on determination, he could defeat his own sorrow. Relying on her own strength, she could bear the ruler's curse. If you have such strength, why don't you go kill people and rob them? Why do you have to work? Huaisher shook his head with regret, feeling despair about this overly fantastical world. I have to admit, Miss Huaisher, Eliza raised her eyes and sighed solemnly. You are an opponent that I can't defeat with alcohol. From this round onwards, I will really start to use the bartender's means. Me too, Huaisher responded with a smile. I have found your weakness, Miss Eliza. Then, let's have a showdown, Miss Huaisher. Eliza smiled, raised her hand, and took off the ring on her left index finger. At that moment, darkness that was thousands of times stronger than before gushed out from her 5 fingers. The curse of death instantly shrouded the entire audience, making it difficult for everyone to breathe. And from the illusion of ashes, the ruler who had already died raised his eyes and stared at the mortal world. That was the reflection left behind by the last existence. Just its existence was enough to freeze people's horror. In the beer barrel in front of Eliza, the valve opened, and a cup of dark beer with pale foam appeared in the glass. And between the 5 fingers of Eliza's left hand, in the small glass, endless malice appeared in the color of vodka. The sorrow was condensing into a curse. Together with the small glass, it fell into the dark beer. There was just a soft puff. That was the dull sound of death falling. Deep water. No, this is the Abyss Bomb specially customized for you. She stared at the smiling woman in front of her and said softly, "Please enjoy, Miss Y. Sure. For a strong opponent like you, there should be such an honor." Chapter 658. A deathly silence suddenly descended. Outside the arena, even the cooking demons were speechless. That cup of pitch-black beer was placed on the counter, as if it occupied the center of the world, pulling everyone's gaze, not allowing them to look away. Just by looking, they felt a wave of drowsiness and drowsiness. This was just a weak influence that could not even be considered as a remnant wave. That precious and terrifying calamity had already been condensed into the cup of beer. Once it was released, perhaps not only the underground plaza, even the manor, and the entire mountain would be swallowed by the aura from hell. It did not pursue deliciousness, but turned to extreme lethality and corrosiveness. This was without a doubt the Abyss Bomb. This what is going on, Elder Jiang Quan. Behind the curtain, the black-toothed official also panicked. Why would such a dangerous thing appear in the cooking demon duel? Quickly make them stop. Please forgive this one for not being able to do so. The old Quan Jiang bowed his head, expressionlessly begging for forgiveness. All of this is in accordance with the rules of the Imperial Cooking Demon Duel. Moreover, even if you want those 2 contestants to stop, they would definitely not be willing, right? The foreign cooking demons are all arrogant people who have no respect for their seniors. Who knows, they might offend Sirs Jade Body. Truly lacking in respect. I am representing the Emperor. Could it be that Elder Jiang Quan has no respect for the Emperor? Don't be too impudent. Then another mocking voice rang out. Left and right, they are just trash who have never seen anything. Since they are the Emperor's emissaries, they should obediently straighten their backs and watch the competition. Ha! Such a weak person will probably not be able to stay in the general's tent for even a day. Vulgar martial artist, what did you say? Haven't I made myself clear enough? Could it be that you want me to recite a poem for you? In the quarrel between the two, Quan Jiang still did not have any expression. He lowered his head like a stone man, allowing both sides to mock and criticize him, respectfully nodding his head. And the competition continued. Truly terrifying. Miss Yji lowered her head, gazing at the abyss bubble floating in the pitch-black beer. Feeling reverence from the bottom of her heart, I wonder how many deaths are needed to create such a spectacular scene. In the beer bubbles, countless withered corpses appeared for a brief moment before quickly dissipating. It was death. He reached out and held the handle of the beer glass. The traces finally felt the evil consequences of
you
his
should be able to
overconfidence.
understand,
No
right?
matter what,
Compared
we
to
shouldn't
quantity,
give up the initiative.
quality is the true
He had
essence.
initially thought
Now,
that it
in
was
the darkness,
a formidable opponent.
he was like a demon
but
in hell.
Who would have thought
Eliza
that his
smiled.
opponent was
Don't
no
you want to
longer
taste
a
it?
formidable opponent?
If I had known,
but a
I would have
T-Rex in
cheated
disguise.
too.
However,
Weisher sighed softly.
this was still within the acceptable range.
How could the archaeological team order her to take a break and forbid her from entering hell again be someone easy to get along with? You'll suffer if you look down on others. This is a lesson. Eliza looked at her eyes and solemnly told her for the last time, admit defeat, Miss Huaiji. It's just a duel. There's no need to gamble your life. I don't want to kill you. You think so? Then my chances of winning seem to be a little higher. Huaiji Susie smiled, raised her eyes, and told her, thank you for your mercy, Eliza. But aren't you also looking down on me? Before she finished speaking, she picked up the beer glass. She drank the crystal of disaster that was filled with the purification of hell in one gulp. She embraced death. It was as if she had hugged the past countless times. The last malicious essence from the former ruler, the curse of death, erupted from Weischer's body at that moment and swallowed everything. His movements came to an abrupt stop. In his hand, the fragile beer glass silently weathered into dust. Only a drop of remaining wine fell to the ground, instantly corroding through the table, down through the iron and stone floor, and finally into the deep ground. It disappeared. The entire underground square was suddenly illuminated by a red alarm light, and a sharp and ear-piercing sound burst forth. The ultra-large depth stabilizer sounded an alarm that it could not bear the burden. Under the corrosion of this drop of wine, it could not maintain the depth of the reality. This can't be considered cooking anymore, right? In the audience stand, old cooking demon shook his head and sighed, what's the difference between this crude use and a bomb? Why don't all the young people these days study their culinary skills? He raised his foot and casually kicked a bamboo basket under his feet, opening a gap. In the darkness of the bamboo basket, a huge shadow appeared. Immediately after, an invisible gravitational force pulled all the leaked abyss sediment and floated into the bamboo basket. Soon it was silent. In the silence, only Miss Huaiji Susie remained sitting in place. Under the slender body, the crisp sound of porcelain cracking could be heard. The face suddenly shattered. After the cracked face, darkness gushed out, turning into a violent waterfall that spread out. Endless disasters emerged from his body with the curse, causing Weischer's soul to tremble. It was drowned and began to slowly dissolve.
As the safety index soared rapidly,
he felt the deepest countless ferocious eyes opened in an instant and looked in all directions. Rapidly solidifying. He had only swallowed a cup of beer, but the curse from the ruler had already wrapped around his soul. Even the crow tide couldn't touch it. It went deep into his bones and spread to every corner of his consciousness. The terrifying gravitational force was pulling at him. It was pulling him deeper into hell. Now, the crack leading to the abyss had been opened. Endless darkness gushed out of his broken body like a waterfall. It quickly polluted the surrounding environment. On the arena, the depth began to decrease again. It was as if he was pulling the entire arena, no, the entire mountain range, and even half of Nara into hell with him. After the cracked face, countless vines and flowers appeared and spread out along the crack, swaying and dancing. The strange plants that flourished in the abyss absorbed all the precipitation around them and grew rapidly. Behind Miss Huaiji Susie, her shadow was rapidly expanding and changing shape. It changed from a human to a more violent state. In the end, the violent shadow completely broke through the restraints of the arena and shrouded the entire underground space. A wild and violent aura covered everyone's heart. It was the form of Weischer falling into hell. But what kind of person could turn into such a terrifying state after solidifying?
It was as if she wanted to devour the whole world. A terrifying aura slowly rose from the ever-changing shadows. Then endless darkness gathered and condensed into a sacred and solemn crown and a bare back above the shadows. Inside Miss Huai Ji Suzi's empty shell, the soul that had merged with miracle was rapidly transforming into a disaster. The violent will sleeping in Huai Shi's soul was finally awakened. The existence called the End Dragon cast an indifferent glance at the mortal world. It was ferocious. Guards, someone come quickly. This is an emergency. Seal off the arena immediately. High up in the stands, a shrill and terrified voice was shouting, "Hurry up! Get rid of that damn thing before it solidifies." The door opened with a bang. The soldier monks, whose faces were shrouded in white, answered the summons. But their movements stopped abruptly, not only because of the cold gazes of the cooking demons, but also because of a wriggling arm that stretched out from the bamboo basket beside Guoshuk's feet. It had a sticky texture like tentacles and was amorphous like liquid, but the slender arm was full of sharp teeth. Human teeth, beast teeth, insect teeth, fish teeth. All the teeth that humans could imagine were gathered on the liquid-like arm. It stopped in front of the soldier monks. The battle between the cooking demons is not over yet. The old cooking demon withdrew his gaze from the arena and looked back arrogantly. "You guys, are you trying to interfere with the competition? Don't come out and make not even as good as a girl." Jeanne, she was still sitting in her seat. She did not scream or feel uneasy. She looked around blankly. It seemed that she did not understand what was going on at all. Miss Huai Ji Suzi's sound and light effects are so powerful. Isn't she about to win? Why are you guys so panicked? This is not the place for you to flaunt your seniority. Guo shook. Behind the curtain on the stands, someone angrily questioned, "If Nara is hurt, can you take responsibility?" "Your place has nothing to do with me." Guoshuk raised his head, and a mocking smile appeared on his wrinkled face. "To be exact, to this old man, I don't need to feel pity for trash like you who can't even be cooked. But this old man still mercifully saved you." He grinned and laughed arrogantly. "Don't you Ingzhou people know how to be grateful?" "Old thing, what nonsense are you talking about?" "Idiots." The muscular cooking demon Flaminical raised his head and glanced at them disdainfully. "Look, even this sand barbarian can't stand it anymore." Guoshuk laughed gloatingly. He did not pity them at all. Just as they said, Guoshuk had saved them, although this old ghost did not want to save anyone at all. But if this group of soldier monks rushed in and interfered with the battle between the cooking demons, it would be really bad. Once Huaiji Suzy lost control, except for a few cooking demons, everyone here would die without a burial place. Besides, it's not over yet, is it? Guoshuk looked at the rapidly cracking and breaking figure. He laughed strangely, and his eyes shone with excitement. She actually swallowed them all. What an enviable appetite! At that moment, in the arena, the broken silhouette that had been stiff for a long time finally raised its head in the darkness. Under the broken face, the corners of its mouth curled up slightly, as if it was smiling. It let out a long breath. Its lips opened and closed, silently praising its opponent. Good wine. Then it was as if time had turned back. The waterfall of darkness that gushed out from Huaiji Suzy's body instantly froze in the arena. Then it began to reverse and shrink inwards. All the flowers and plants that grew and multiplied welcomed the transformation as they shrank. Little by little, they merged with the darkness into the gradually closing silhouette. In the end, the crack closed. It was as if nothing had happened. It was just a short sleep. Her beautiful face was still perfect and flawless. Only behind her, The ferocious silhouette of the final dragon slowly opened its eyes. It took one last look at this shallow mortal world and withdrew its gaze in boredom. It quickly shrank back to its original shape. After a long time, Huaisher opened his eyes. He slowly woke up from this inverted dream that was comparable to a hangover. Under the illusion, the face belonging to him slowly curved up, and along with the paper in his arms and Suzy, a smile appeared on his face. The two pairs of completely different eyes overlapped and quickly became blurry. Then, Huaiji Suzy slowly raised her head and expressed her sincere gratitude to Eliza. "Thank you for your hospitality. I am very grateful." Eliza didn't know if it was an illusion or something, but in the silence, she suddenly felt that in front of her, this opponent, who was originally like a beauty in a painting, had become alive. It was as if he had finally walked out of the painting. "Is there any change?" Her fingers flicked slightly under the bar counter, and she stared at the opponent in front of her, trying to distinguish any signs of solidification. But she felt that she couldn't see anything. If she felt that she was looking at an empty shell before, now she felt that this empty shell was hidden in the fog. She couldn't even determine whether the other party really existed. "Thanks to you, I have grown a little, right?" Huaisher smiled emotionally and looked at the remains of the beer glass in his hand. "I'm really full. I'm afraid I can't drink anymore." This was a work created by the Curse of Grief, and it was indeed the abyss bomb. Once swallowed, it was as if a whole hell had exploded in his stomach. He was about to burst his limit, and even the crows in the cage of dreams were almost drunk to death. Even if he had a little more, he wouldn't be able to continue drinking. The disaster created by the ruler's curse imprint was too huge. Even Huaisher almost solidified several times in the process. But unfortunately, he lingered on the edge of solidification too many times. His experience was too rich. What was more coincidental was that he was wearing a smuff that was specially used to replace himself being eroded by the abyss, the non-existent phantom. Huaisher Suzy welcomed growth in this disaster. It was just like those scam games that said something like elite transformation, spiritual base rebirth, first stage advancement, and so on. The old limitations were broken, and the value was increased. The degree of solidification of the phantom greatly increased. Unfortunately, the biggest change was also like a scam game. The card face was more beautiful. Dazed cat. JPG now. Eliza stared at this extremely strange opponent who couldn't see the depth of her strength and finally warned her, "I can make 3 more glasses of this wine." "I know," Huaisher Suzy said, "but you won't have the chance to make the next one. After this round is over, you will admit defeat." She repeated her words and smiled. A trace of awe-inspiring solemnity was revealed in the past coquettish and charming, "because I have found your weakness." The forging furnace was activated again. This time, a pure and sacred light rose from the sake, illuminating the pair of dark eyes like the abyss. Just like this, she held the small wine glass with both hands and presented her final work so kindly and respectfully. "It's time for the sun to rise, Ms. Eliza," she asked. "Are you ready to welcome the dawn?" Chapter 659. It was a thin cup of wine that was called dawn. It illuminated Eliza's pupils, and the gentle and pure light was rippling in faint ripples without any lethality. Just by smelling it, one could feel the strong fragrance of incense. The sharp sound of steel scraping against each other burst forth. Whether it was Eliza
even though it was
or
sealed
the
off
cooking
by
demons
flesh and
outside,
blood,
they were all
it became
stunned.
so oppressive.
Even if an acolyte
Eliza's
were to look
body,
at it,
in
they
the
would be able
astonished
to easily
exclamation
tell
of the audience
that there was no
a sharp
malice
sort
in
of
it.
light
In
pierced
other
through her
words,
back,
it was
obliquely
simply a cup of
stained with
medicinal
sticky
wine
blood for healing,
and pointed to
but
the
now,
ceiling.
this thin
Then
light of
the second
dawn
one,
made Eliza
it
fall into
pierced
silence
through the vest in
after
front
a
of her
long
chest,
time,
and
her
came out
eyes
from the position of
slightly
her
raised,
heart,
cutting
she
her
sighed
arm.
softly. Wisps
So
of darkness
despicable.
quickly
Miss
flew
Why
out
she?
from the wound that had been pierced.
That's too
through.
sad.
But
Do
it
I look
couldn't
like
cover the
such a
huge
despicable
flame running
person?
in her body.
Weisher
It was
spread
like
out
the
his
sun
hands
slowly
and asked
rising at dawn.
doubtfully.
The
Although I was
tyrannical
forced to
light
swallow the
swept
abyss
away
bomb.
all the
You
darkness.
see, there is
and actually
evil.
no anger
The third
or
one,
resentment
the
in this
fourth
cup of
one,
wine. The fifth
I
one,
hope it's that
the
kind of
sharp
thing.
sound was
But
endless.
I'm not that
in an
kind of
instant,
person.
thousands of
Why
swords
sure
pierced
smiled
through her
compared
heart.
to blood debts.
A large amount
I
of
prefer
blood
to repay
spurted out
evil with
from the
good.
broken body.
A long time
the
ago,
viscous
a big
scarlet
sister
flowed
once told me
along the blade.
that love can
almost
conquer everything,
completely covering
and I
the area
deeply
behind
believe
the
it.
bar counter.
Only by
the
sharing
sharp sword
generously
blades
and
intertwined with
selflessly
each
can I
other,
get the other
becoming a
party's
cold
reward.
cage.
In the end,
it almost completely
everyone was
tore
very
her body
grateful to
apart.
me. He
A
paused for a
beauty in
moment
such a
and
tragic
said
situation in
seriously,
an instant,
I believe you will
even
too.
the coldest
Being
person would not
stared
be
at
able
by
to
such
bear
a
it.
calm and
They
warm
could
gaze.
empathize with
Eliza
this
did not
painful
feel
torture.
relaxed at all.
The pure
Instead,
origin
her
substance
whole
of the
body
sword of
tensed up.
virtue operated
It was
in
as
Eliza's
if she was
body,
being
taking
stared
root
at
and
by
sprouting
something
like a
terrible.
plant.
She
It
felt
destroyed
as
from
if
the
there was a
inside
knife
out
at
in
her
the
back.
most violent
Repay
and decisive
evil
way.
with good.
Except
Love
for a
conquers
certain large
everything.
husky,
Shared
no matter how strong a
generously
creature
and
was,
selflessly,
its internal
this
organs
kind of line would
and
be
intestines
outdated
would
and
not grow
20
a
years ago,
carapace.
but
in an
now
instant,
it made
she
people
suffered
shudder.
such a
It
tragic
was precisely
injury.
because she
Eliza
knew
did
what
not
this cup
fall.
of dawn represented.
She was still
that she
tenaciously
could feel the
standing.
hidden malice.
This
in it.
might be a heavy
Even
injury
if this
to a
cruel
fourth level
and cold
ascendant,
malice
but
was
to
not
her,
in the wine.
it was not
This
enough
feeling
to
of being
threaten her
caught
life.
in a trap of my own
Ascendants
making,
who had
is
stepped
really
into the star
not good.
antimony stage.
Eliza
had
sighed,
already become the
self-deprecatingly.
incarnation of the sacred
She raised
mark.
her hand
to Sharon,
and held the
who
small
was
porcelain
wandering
cup
on the river
between
Styx,
Miss
the
flesh and
Wyshie's
blood
hands.
body was
Then
nothing more
she
than
drank
a burden.
it in one gulp.
As long as
The
Eliza was
clear
willing,
amber,
she
liquid
could transform
entered
into a
his
state
throat,
of burning
bringing
origin
with it a
substance
wonderful
at any
fragrance.
time.
The
And
aroma
truly
hidden
become
under the
Karen's
alcohol was
incarnation.
gently aroused,
This kind of heavy
and a thick
injury
fog
was
of rich
not
fragrance
worth
passed
mentioning.
through his throat.
She stretched
In
out
his
her
stomach,
hand,
a warm
holding the
taste
sword
spread
in
out,
front of her chest,
and his entire body
five
felt
fingers
warm.
slightly
It was like
tightened
soaking in a hot
between
spring.
her 5 fingers.
Not
The
only was her
sharp blade of
spirit
light
refreshed,
shattered,
and
even
was
the
pulled
old
out
injuries
by
in
her,
her body
quickly
began to heal
dissipating
quickly.
into the air.
Originally,
Then
it should be
a
like
second,
this.
a
If
third,
it was
not
anyone
long
else,
after,
it
her
should
hands,
be like
which
this.
were covered in cracks,
Anyone but her
pulled out
after
all the
she
blades
shed
from
her
her
body,
gentle and
crushed
harmless
them,
appearance,
and threw them
this
away.
overly sharp
The bloodied
hypocrisy
Orisa
finally
raised her
revealed
head.
its sharpness
the wounds
in her heart.
all over her body,
Her expression
quickly
stiffened
closing.
for a moment,
Her skin
and she
healed.
stood still.
Her blood flowed backwards, and her internal organs returned. Apart from the tears in her vest and trousers, nothing else could be seen. Huaisher's attack had not affected her in the slightest, but this could not be considered an attack. At most, it was just a side effect of the treatment. "Are you feeling better?" Huaisher Susie asked with concern. "To be honest, it's terrible." Eliza lowered her head, staring at her healed hands. Her 10 fingers clenched slightly. A shattering sound came from within her body. A low sound, like the sound of a stone slab cracking, continuously rang out. It was as if the cracks in a thick mountain had begun to spread, and it began to collapse. After her illness was healed, she temporarily did not have the burden of her injuries, and her strength erupted without any hindrance. In an instant, a terrifying aura descended upon the arena. It was as if the ferryman of the underworld river had personally arrived, coldly selecting the souls in front of him. She had become even stronger. She no longer had the burden of the curse. Under the cleansing of the origin substance of the virtuous sword, the curse entangled in her bone marrow was completely swept away, and the damage it had caused was negligible. It did not cause any damage. It could be said that it had gently helped her sweep away
the evil energy in her body. Huaishur had healed his enemy, but now this recovery had caused Eliza to stand on the edge of a cliff. On the silver bracelet on her right wrist, a blood-colored gem slowly lit up, emitting a red warning light, repeatedly reminding her of just how dangerous her current situation was. This was the destruction brought about by kindness and love. At the same time, it was also Eliza's greatest weakness. She had given Huaishur too many opportunities. She was too soft-hearted towards beauties, but at the same time, she was too confident in her own skills and strength. Indeed, Karen's strength allowed her to calmly retreat, even when facing a fifth-level ascendant. When traversing the infernal realm, she would never get lost because of the depth. And her outstanding skills made her even more powerful, allowing her to retreat unscathed after entering dangerous ruins several times. But the premise of all this was that she had not been cursed by the ruler. Thanks to him, the current Eliza had been forced to rest and could not enter any infernal realm. Even the Continuation Academy was unable to resolve the curse that had penetrated deep into her bone marrow. They could only make both sides coexist in a balanced state after modifying her. Not long ago, she looked like she had been infected by a curse. That was the safest state she could be in, but now a slight tilt appeared on the balance that had been carefully maintained, a friction that should not have appeared in the complicated and harmonious mechanical structure. The moment this reckless kindness healed her, the balance was broken. An ant's nest appeared on the dam. As for how serious the consequences would be, it might not necessarily be. At most, it would only weaken the seal on the curse slightly. But this was enough to trigger a state of alert. If she dared to use any cooking demon skills again, the loophole in the seal would rapidly expand and extend. Once the balance was broken, the tilt would only become faster and faster, and in the end, there would be no room for recovery. The ruler's curse would be completely leaked. At that time, not only herself, but even the entire Nara would be implicated. This was not a crisis that a cup of abyss bomb could compare to. In the silence, Eliza sighed and suddenly said, "I can still continue." "I know." Huaishur nodded. "You are in excellent condition now. If you want to decide the victor, I have absolutely no chance of winning. However, when it comes to shameless fighting, I am very confident." He thought for a moment and raised 3 fingers. "If you don't care about the consequences, then I don't have to worry about it." Miss Huaishur told her, "I can last 3 rounds before losing." Eliza was unmoved. "Even if the curse is leaked, it might not be as bad as you think." "I also know." Huaishur nodded. "At best, there is a hidden danger. You have the possibility of winning 90%, no, more than 90%, but your sense of responsibility will not allow you to bear the consequences of failure." Speaking of this, he couldn't help but sigh. "I'm sorry, Miss Eliza. Although moral kidnapping is despicable, it is really useful for people like you." Eliza did not answer. Perhaps, compared to the ruler's curse, this was Eliza's biggest weakness. From the beginning, when she revealed that she was a member of the archaeological team, Huaishur already knew. It was true that many of the explorers in the abyss were lunatics with deep self-destructive tendencies and lunatics thirsting for disaster, but at the same time, there were also a large number of people who were not like this. Instead, they chose to go to hell with the love of this world in their hearts, a dignified fourth order sublimator. The elite and elite of the archaeological team actually worked for this kind of trash for money. Even in the face of an opponent like himself, she repeatedly showed mercy. This Miss Eliza was too gentle. In the end, was this weakness caught? Eliza laughed self-deprecatingly and shook her head. She raised her hand and took out a bottle of whiskey from the wine cabinet. She raised her hand and casually poured it into a glass. After the burning pine would flashed past, It coated the wine with a light layer of smoke. Finally, she casually threw 2 cherries into the glass. She didn't use any cooking skills at all. It was just an ordinary bartending. She placed it in front of Huaisher. Until the end, I still haven't let you taste the real bartending. It's a bit unreconciled to just leave like this, so I'll treat it as a gift. Try it. She picked up a glass and drank it in one gulp. Huaisher was stunned for a moment. He picked up the glass and sniffed it carefully. The fragrance of pine wood and the unique peat smell of whiskey mixed together, and the marinated cherries exuded a sweet smell, making the fruity and floral fragrance even more rich. It was unbelievably fresh. When tasting and sipping, he could feel the strong taste of whiskey and the sweetness of cherries spreading in the mouth, slowly swallowing. In the end, the slightly sour taste brought by the chewing of cherries perfectly covered the slightly bitter aftertaste of the whiskey. It's really a good wine. Huaisher couldn't help but exclaim, "What's the name?" "Let me think. Let's call it Smoky Cherries." Eliza smiled. "How does it taste?" "Wonderful." Huaisher nodded in agreement. This was a field that his half-baked wine couldn't touch. "Anything else?" he asked. "You have to drink in moderation. If you really want to be happy, 1 glass is enough. Besides, the competition is over, isn't it?" Eliza smoked and suddenly smiled, slyly. She leaned close to his ear and whispered softly, "Actually, you also exposed a weakness, Miss Huaisher. I've heard Lucian talk about the similar source substance in that glass of dawn many times. It reminds me of your background, the ivory tower, and your skills." At that moment, Huaisher was stunned. Eliza, on the other hand, had already seen through his deepest disguise and saw the secret that he wanted to hide. She whispered softly in his ear with a smile, "I really didn't expect that you are Huaisher." In an instant, Huaisher felt like he was struck by lightning. He almost didn't hear the second half of her sentence. "Mistress, right?" A bolt from the blue flashed. After the feint, Huaisher only felt countless question marks rising from his head. He was stunned. "What are you talking about?" Widening her eyes in disbelief, Miss Huaisher opened her mouth in shock. She was stunned for a long time before she reacted. She didn't know whether she should be angry or glad. She could only raise her hand and point at her face in grief and indignation. "Do I look like a mistress to you? Who knows?" Eliza smiled strangely and sighed. "I didn't expect a beauty like Miss Huaisher would fall in love with such a scumbag." How is Mr. Huaisher a scumbag? He doesn't even have a girlfriend yet." When it came to his reputation and 18 years of innocence, Huaisher refuted angrily. But then he saw Eliza's eyes became more and more strange. She looked at Miss Huaisher in front of her, and the corners of her mouth slowly raised. "Soon, Takashi, you still say that you don't know martial arts?" Huaisher couldn't spit out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't defend himself. "What is this? I'm seducing myself? Refuting is guilty, and not arguing is admitting it. Both sides are blocked. Anyway, the title of mistress is really dead. Can't you bunch of onlookers have some conscience?" Eliza raised her hand, "I won't use this to threaten her shoulder. I'm already in my 30s. What haven't I seen? You have to be careful. Don't be embarrassed. All the gifts given by fate will be secretly marked with a price. Some men look pure, cute, and serious, but in fact, once they take off their clothes, you don't know what kind of big-tailed wolf they are. Miss Huaisher, a beauty who looks cold but is actually pure, is the easiest to be played by that kind of scumbag. Sorry, I haven't fallen to the extent of falling in love with a smuff. Please don't worry about it, and don't say that I'm a pervert, okay?" Huaisher was speechless. He could only be silent awkwardly and look into the distance. He silently mourned his reputation that had fallen into the abyss. He cried silently in his heart, After all, if there was a choice, who would want to be a mistress? Then, Big Sister Bartender's relationship consultation ends here. Finally, Eliza raised her finger and handed over a business card. She winked at her. If your feelings are hurt, you are welcome to complain to me at any time. By the way, you are my type, so I can give you a discount. That rather hot and appreciative gaze made the back of Weischer's head jump, and he felt cold all over. But on second thought, it didn't seem to be a bad thing, right? Why can't I stick close to the blonde big sister when I'm pregnant? When he reacted, he seemed to have accepted the business card. Eliza had already patted the table, causing the workbench to shrink instantly and return to the rapidly closing suitcase. She took a coat from the last clothes hanger and put it on to cover the wound left by the sword. She picked up the suitcase and left. Hey, Eliza, where are you going? Just outside the arena. In the audience, the middle-aged man with a livid face couldn't help scolding in unison, "What the hell are you doing? Could it be that you've been bribed as well?" "Sorry, boss, as you can see, I can't win against her." Eliza shrugged calmly. "Even if you are not happy, please don't slander my professional ethics, okay? You can obviously win." "Yeah, but if I win, it doesn't mean that you will win." Eliza sighed. "If I continue to fight with her, even if I win, half of Nara will completely disappear. Do you know what the consequences of such an ending will be for you?" "You." Riken Mickey's expression twitched, and he couldn't speak. "Don't worry. I will refund you half of the money, but the credit card part can't be refunded. If you doubt it and want to get it back, I can only wait for my next month's salary to pay you back slowly. Goodbye." She waved her hand calmly and said goodbye to her employer. Eliza left the arena suavely, all the way through the corridor, walked out of the basement, and politely declined Riken's offer to drive her back. She walked out of the door and turned the corner. Then he suddenly bent down and supported himself against the wall. Then he vomited. Ugh. The undigested matter with a strong smell of alcohol fell to the ground awkwardly and piled up into a pool. Wisps of vicious black smoke lingered around it, and something was wriggling in it. It was faintly bloody. In the end, after vomiting, her makeup was a little messy. She took out a tissue from her pocket, wiped the tears, snot, and dirt from the corners of her mouth. Then she took out a bottle of water and skillfully rinsed her mouth. She lit a cigarette and finally breathed a sigh of relief, showing exhaustion. The most important rule of drinking to determine the winner: maintain your poise until the last moment. In the end, I almost capsized in a ditch. If I knew it, I wouldn't have tried to be strong. Wouldn't it be over if I just admitted defeat? She helplessly gave advice in hindsight. She smoked, gritted her teeth, and endured the twitching of her internal organs. Life was like a play, and it all depended on acting skills. The damage caused by Weischer in the first 2 rounds was far greater than he had imagined. After all, not everyone had the terrifying abyss endurance and recovery ability of a certain cowherd. Moreover, not everyone's head could be intact after being hit by the axe of wrath more than a dozen times, sealed by the rope of sorrow, and repeatedly pierced by the sword of virtue. Heavy injuries. It was a serious injury. Fortunately, the opponent was still young and was fooled by her. Unfortunately, it still didn't change the final result. Eliza shook her head helplessly, took out an old-fashioned folding phone from her pocket, and dialed the emergency number. "Hello? Is this the Continuation Academy? Your broken seal has leaked. Yes, it's the same as my aunt bleeding. Come and pick me up." The moment the phone hung up, a light fell from the sky. She disappeared on the spot. 2 seconds later, another light fell from the sky and swept away the vomit on the ground. There were no more traces in front of the gate of the Rygian family's manor. Only the cigarette that fell on the ground calmly flickered, and the smoke dissipated in the wind. Just like that, holding on to the last of her poise and elegance, the bartender Eliza left. Imperial Chef Demon tried it out. The winner, Why Sure Susie. Chapter 660. There was an anxious atmosphere in the quiet room. During the long wait, Ray Jian Bujing sat in his seat, holding the phone in his hand in annoyance. There were several times when he couldn't help but want to call and urge him, but in the end, he endured it. He tried his best to restrain his ugly expression and calm himself down, but sweat continued to seep out from his forehead. He was anxious. He resisted the urge to get angry and forced himself to wait until the sound of low footsteps came from outside the door. The young samurai pushed the door and entered. Reijian Jiujing knelt respectfully on the tatami and bowed his head to greet Reijian Bujing. Thank you for waiting for so long, uncle. Xinjiang, what are you doing? Jiujing. Ray Jian Bujing subconsciously wanted to get angry, but in the end, he took a deep breath and asked anxiously, What should I do? That person is not like what you said at all. What the hell is going on here? Now someone has asked me to give up the shares and position of the Kansan group. That's not what we said at the beginning. It's just a group of fence-sitters who want to add insult to injury. For uncle, this is just dust falling from the roof beam. Don't worry about it. You just need to calm down and wait for the limelight to pass. But what about that bastard Zhen Shi? Ray Jian Bujing asked angrily. I personally ordered people to threaten her. Can this matter be settled? No, I have to go and lie low for a while. I can go to America or the Russian Federation. Xinjiang, you must have connections. Hurry up and arrange it immediately. I can help you there. It's not that bad yet, uncle. Jiu Jing raised his voice and interrupted his words. He finally raised his lowered eyes. A ray of sharp light shot out from his slender eyes, like a sharp blade, making Ray Jian Bujing's expression stiffen. Please don't worry, uncle, you are harmless. He still said respectfully, They won't do anything to you, and neither will Zhen Shi. In fact, a person like you is really useless. If you encounter any trouble, you can just surrender and resign from your current position. Take the money you have earned over the years. Aren't you the one who find a small place to serve my foster father? No one will like think my own father. Threat. Rigian in the silence, gritted his teeth. The veins on his forehead twitched. But as he stared at his own son, pinched, he did not have the strength to be ugly creases. He asked his face was ashen, almost as if he was begging. I'm your biological father. Why are you so heartless? He angrily rebuked. Don't you know anything about gratitude? Thank you for your hospitality. My name is Richimi take my leave Kushizu. Now. Uncle. Jiu Jing slowly got up and bowed. Kushizu. Just before he left. 8 years ago, he looked back when you gave me away for the sake of power. Don't worry, seeing that as long as you stay here calm, obediently, his tone nothing will fluctuate at all. Just take it told him as the last benevolence since you've already obtained power. Please don't be sentimental about the things you've sold. The low sound of footsteps had come to this point, gradually what faded was the point into of talking distance? About something in the quiet room as gratitude? Richimi Bujing sat paralyzed on the ground, stunned. He didn't have the strength to get up. His face was ashen, until the footsteps outside the door sounded again. He was stunned for a moment. Then he got up in surprise, pushed open the door, and rushed over. I knew you would come back, Jing River. You wouldn't let go of your biological son. Outside the door, the female attendant whose wrist was grabbed by him was stunned. She stared at him blankly. Mr. Bujing, Master Jiu Jing ordered me to clean up the corridor. I'm sorry. I'll leave now. Sorry to disturb you. She couldn't help but panic when she was stared at by the pair of eyes that were gradually turning ferocious. She ran away pathetically. In the silence, Richimi Bujing was left alone on the ground. His expression gradually became distorted. Both of you are like this. One day, all of you will pay the price. He roared angrily at the empty corridor. Do you think that the shameful things you have done can escape the eyes of others? No one responded. Only after a long time did he finally calm down. He made up his mind. Escape. He had to escape from this house. After losing his power, this place had become a tiger's den. Even his former biological son would abandon him like a worn-out shoe. He had never expected his so-called family to be merciful. After making up his mind, he hurriedly left. He called the driver. 10 minutes later, a car silently drove out of the back door and disappeared into the night. We're not going to the capital. We're going to Sanchong. Richimi Bujing calmed down and ordered the driver. Then he took out his phone and dialed a number. Fortunately, he had cultivated many subordinates in other places. Otherwise, he didn't know how tragic this situation would be. He couldn't stay in the Richimi family anymore. He didn't even want to stay in Yingzhou. He would go to Sanchong, then go through the border transit and change his appearance. After a while, he would let a substitute dress up as him and go to the Russian Federation. Then he would go directly to America from Shinjiport. In America, he still had a foundation that was enough for him to make a comeback. After going through every step of the plan repeatedly and confirming that there were no flaws, he fell asleep. Soon, he woke up with a start. The car slowed down abruptly. He suddenly opened his eyes. What's wrong? Sir, there seems to be a car accident in front. The road is blocked. The driver stuck his head out of the window and stared at the roadblock not far away. He didn't know what had happened. In the next moment, his head suddenly tilted from its original position. It hung on his neck by a little bit of flesh. Blood spurted out. He died in a daze. Richimi Bujing screamed. Outside the car window, in the deep night, there was a burning flame. A ferocious warrior covered in heavy armor and dyed red with blood appeared outside the car window. The cold visor drooped slightly, and the indifferent eyes looked down at Richimi's twisted face. In his hand, the katana was slowly raised and slashed down. The steel twisted and wailed. The bulletproof car was easily torn apart and broken into two halves. The burning warrior stepped forward and approached the limp Richimi step by step. Behind the visor, the pair of eyes also burned with a ghostly light full of resentment and ferocity. This is impossible. This is not right, Richimi screamed in horror. Why is it you? It should be. The blade slashed down. Slash. This was the last scene that Richimi Bujing saw. Huaisher felt like he had a dream. He returned to the familiar darkness, a quiet sleep. Only the ripples of the source substance reverberated in his soul, intertwining in the rapidly growing destiny and activating some mechanism hidden under the surface of the water. It caused his consciousness and memories to constantly collide. His thoughts overlapped with each other without any rules, and incomplete images flashed without any warning. It was as if there was an invisible hand slowly selecting in his consciousness, skillfully activating one fragment after another, causing Huaisher's consciousness to operate and evolve on its own. In the end, it was just like the final conclusion of the calculation system in the black box. An inexplicable voice from the depths of his soul sounded in his ears. It came from Huaisher's consciousness, composed of Huaisher's thoughts, pure experience, and enlightenment. That inexplicable feeling pulled at the floating words in his consciousness, and finally formed a question from a long time ago. Shiha has not risen. Where is the light of Ruohua? Shiha, the goddess among the gods of Dongxiao in the past. The solemn sun wheel was her carriage, rising in the east and setting in the west with her every day, overlooking the mortal world. But now, the sun had not risen yet. How could there be light in this world? At that moment, light lit up in front of Huaisher's eyes. Once again, he saw the sparkling and majestic ocean, the source of all consciousness, souls, and wisdom in the world, the endless silver ocean. That unknown light led him to look down. His gaze penetrated the deep sea, illuminating the incomplete form of the White Queen. That magnificent and huge silhouette was quietly sleeping in the deepest part of the ocean, just like the extinguished sun. The sun seemed to have extinguished. The moon rose from the sky. It was like a huge ball, round, just like when it was young. The faint light shone on the stone. The stone was white, and the water was black. The wild grass and flowers in the courtyard emitted the fragrance of vegetation. There was the light of fireflies in the grass. The wind blew in the distant night. She sat in a rocking chair, looking around blankly. Soon, she realized that this was her dream. Lucid dream? The internet said that there is such a thing, right? She scratched her head in confusion and looked around the old wooden house behind her. Indeed, this was the place that left the deepest impression in her memory. In her childhood, when her grandmother and father were still alive, this was the small courtyard and house that protected them. Although it would occasionally leak when it rained, the sound of the water falling on the copper basin would be crisp. It was like a symphony. Symphony was a word she learned later, but she had never heard it once. It should be very powerful, right? Miss Huaiji seemed to know it very well. When she thought of this, she saw the figure sitting under the wooden porch under the moonlight. She looked up at the moonlight in the sky alone. The moonlight also became thinner, falling into her eyes, making her eyes glow. She was stunned for a long time, and then nodded in realization. Miss Huaiji was also in the dream. That was great. She suddenly felt happy. Chapter 661. Was it because they were thinking about each other, or was it because their minds were connected? Makoto didn't know the answer to that question, but she felt inexplicably happy when Haoki-san appeared in her dream. The Haoki-san in her dream was just like any other time. She was cold and aloof, making her seem unapproachable. But when she gathered her courage and sat next to her, she felt like she could feel her warmth. And when she gathered her courage and shortened the distance between them, she could feel their bodies touching. She held his hand. She was happy. Unfortunately, this Haoki-san didn't seem to know how to speak, nor did she react. Was her imagination too lacking? At this time, she should have used her willpower and imagined the domineering Haoki-san pushing her against the wall and lifting her chin with one hand. As she imagined this, Makoto began to laugh like a fool, saliva dripping from her mouth. Unfortunately, this didn't happen. Were dreams like this sometimes? Even if she knew that this was a dream, many things were difficult to change, such as the passionate Haoki-san. Although it was regrettable, she was satisfied with just this. Haoki-san, do you want to drink some tea? Drinking tea in a dream seems quite strange. Unfortunately, there aren't any books or anything else here. It's rare for you to come to my house, so why don't you take a look inside? Makoto said this to herself, then gathered her courage and pulled Haoki-san's hand. And then Haoki-san stood up and stood to the side, as if waiting for her to show her around. Instead, Makoto's face suddenly flushed red, bringing Haoki-san home. How should she describe it? She was so excited. Unfortunately, this place was no longer as warm as it used to be. I'm sorry. I didn't know that guests were coming. Even my dreams are so messy. I've had enough. After pushing open the wooden door, after a long silence, she saw that the floor was covered in dust. Vigorously. As expected, this chair was my grandmother's no one lived here for a long time. When she was alive, after my grandmother passed away, sit here, this place was abandoned. When he saw me, this place was carefully taken care of. This gap is where my front teeth fell out when I was young. In the spring, there would be flowers placed in a vase. My mother would sit here and do some handicrafts. Makoto sometimes she would make a few dolls. The vase at the entrance was broken. Dad would come home, and there were only very withered flowers every day left in it. But it no longer had the fragrance of the past. He would hear the sound of the door. There were still traces of sunlight on the floor. Sometimes Father would have been covered by the furniture. She was asleep. Unfortunately, and there was nothing Mother would ask him to keep his voice down for a broken chair. Originally, standing alone under the moonlight of my grandmother when she was it's better young, not to look. My grandfather Shinichi shook her head and my mother when she was young. Later Let's go somewhere else. It was changed to pictures of me. And my grandmother, was the first time she heard after Miss that, why it was no longer hung here. That figure walked it was past her, as if she was showing off her treasures. She looked around Shinichi walked curiously, in her dream and wiped away the dust bit by bit. The story she told of what the only here. Visitor about the past. Shinichi was stunned. In the end, in the empty bedroom, she blew away the dust on the canvas and saw the old graffiti in the mottled colors. This was actually left here. She held the frame and sighed softly. Then she laughed softly. If only this wasn't a dream. I really want to bring it back. Is it something very precious? Miss Huaiji asked. You can say that. The girl sighed softly and looked at the faded traces of paint on the canvas. My father drew this for me. When I was young, I always said that I wanted to go to the big city that was mentioned on TV. In fact, I didn't even know what a big city looked like. I only knew that people there wore beautiful dresses, there were many cute dolls and toys, and there were endless candies. But what my father and mother said was different from what I thought. Later on, my father drew a picture for me one day, but the drawing was so ugly that I couldn't tell anything. This is it. She showed the frame in her hand. There were only blurry patches of color left on it, and it was difficult to tell what it looked like in the past. This is the sun, this is a tall building, and this should be a car, right? I don't remember what this is. It seems that my father forgot as well. Shinichi shook her head and whispered softly, my mother told me that Edo was like this. At dusk, the white buildings would be dyed pink, and the glass would emit a golden light. There are so many people on the streets that I can't even count them. Cars are driving in groups, as if they are throwing a tantrum. I always thought that they were lying to me, but the first time I left Daoquan Village, I realized that the outside world was exactly as they said. Miss Huaiji, have you been to other places? Other countries and borders? She turned around and asked curiously, someone as powerful as you must have been to other places, right? It was as if she was admitting it, only looked at the picture frame in her hand, as if she wasn't, and didn't answer. She didn't know if she was listening. It was as if she was hidden in a fog, difficult to reach, and impossible to see clearly. But even if she was cold, there was a sense of reassurance. It was as if as long as she was by her side, she would never be afraid. When she held her hand, she felt warm, as if she was being illuminated by the sun. But if that was all, she felt that it wasn't enough. Because she was lonely. Shinichi looked up, wanting to say something, but stopped. He had never felt such a desire to know her better. She wanted to stand by her side more intimately. She wanted to be like Miss Huaiji. At that moment, the girl finally mustered up her courage. Miss Huaiji, Then she woke up from her dream. It was broken at the cruelest part. The girl opened her eyes on the bed and looked at the pale ceiling in shock. She didn't know when her hand had reached out, as if she wanted to touch something, but she didn't touch anything. She was stunned. Below the Stone Marrow Museum, at some point in the basement, which was dozens of times larger than the surface, it was as large as a huge plaza. Tangi's hand paused for a moment, and she looked away from the projection of the Book of Destiny. She looked up and saw a small dot of light floating in front of her. Is this a believer? As if in disbelief, she was silent for a long time, then suddenly laughed softly. She didn't expect that in order to complete the substitute, after creating the reflection of Huaiji Suko, the divinity of the young master of destiny could be sprouted from the essence of her soul. And this divinity was even pointing in the direction of East Lord, faintly possessing the characteristics of Shihi. No matter how deep her foundation wasn't this a little too much? What was this? Was it a surprise or a shock? This was really too interesting. Why sure, we are indeed the most compatible contractors in the world. She narrowed her eyes in pleasure, humming a vague and ancient tune. Behind her, the god's wedge floated quietly like the sun, glowing faintly. As soon as Huaisher opened his eyes, he sensed that something was wrong. Of course, it wasn't that he saw Huaiji Suko playing crow or something. Rather, he felt that something had changed. Something was different. Early in the morning, as he was brushing his teeth in a daze, he looked into the mirror and saw his own reflection. It had completely transformed into Huaiji Suko. This was a state that was close to completion. Huaisher's reflection had completely overlapped with Huaiji Suko's record. Through young master of destiny's reflection as a medium, she could be said to be the embodiment of Huaisher's origin substance. She could even take his place to complete some simple tasks and tasks. If it was just rapid progress, he wouldn't be so surprised. But who could tell him what that faint halo above his head in the mirror was? Heavens, I've become an immortal! He put down his toothbrush, dumbfounded, and raised his head to look above his head. Under the sunlight outside the window, the faint halo above his head glowed faintly. What was this thing? But when he reached out to touch it, the faint halo quickly dissipated. It was as if it had never existed. Just as he was rubbing his chin, thinking for a moment, calmly analyzing, and then making a call to angrily scold a certain black-hearted woman for doing something, his phone rang first. It was Hupo's number. "You did this." As soon as the call connected, an angry voice came from the other side. "What?" Huaisher was confused. "What did I do now? Wait, did someone see what Huaiji Suko did last night?" He lowered his head in shock and looked at his own reflection. He suddenly didn't know how to explain that his avatar seemed to have become sentient and that there was an additional halo above his head. Who knew what kind of heartless thing had happened? He had just fallen asleep after a hangover. On the bright side, At least he didn't open his eyes like in the movies and have a baby next to his pillow. Then he really wouldn't be able to defend himself. Lianjian Bujing is dead. That's it. Hearing Hu Po's voice, Huaishir subconsciously let out a sigh of relief. You scared me to death. I thought you were going to slander my innocence. Speaking of which, what does Lianjian Bujing's death have to do with Huaiji Suko? You really didn't do it. Hupu was still full of doubt. Huaishir, we're grasshoppers on the same line. You don't need me to explain this logic, right? If you want to do something, you don't have to do it behind my back. Huaishir couldn't help but roll his eyes. He already left. I was so drunk last night that I could barely walk. It's fine if you want me to take someone's virginity from thousands of miles away, but to chop a middle-aged uncle. Do you think I'm crazy? Speaking of which, how did he die? Who did it? Who else could it be? Hupa sighed with a headache. Of course it's Lianjian Bujing. At this moment, a candidate who left died. This matter has completely blown up. You have to be careful. Maybe the people from Looming Hall will come looking for you. If they come looking for you, don't say anything. Don't do anything unnecessary. I'll be there immediately. Are you sure? Huaishir asked. What else? Hupa was angry. Do you believe that if I don't do anything, how many people will be anxious to put this blame on your head? No, I don't have any suspicions. Huaishir raised his head and looked in the direction of the door. What I mean is, if you want to be a defense lawyer, you can prepare now. In that instant, the door turned to dust with a loud bang. Surrender yourself. A burly figure wearing a bamboo hat rushed into the room and roared angrily. Shook his head and couldn't help but sigh. It's just that this doesn't look like they're here to talk nicely.
Chapter 662. Logically speaking, at this time, Huaishir should raise his hands and shout that he wanted to find a lawyer. Before the lawyer came, he wouldn't say a word. He wouldn't say a word until
His
Little
hair
Amber came
and
to the
beard
looming hall
all
to
stood up,
complain that they
and his
mistreated
pocket
his
exploded,
client, and
his
he
short
wanted to
red
appeal
hair
or something
spread out
This
like
should be the
fire.
common plot. The
But
sacred
the
mark
person who
of the
came to the
Ingzhou
door
genealogy
now
didn't seem to be
mistress of the
inviting
Green
him over
Quarter.
for tea.
How
Instead,
dare you resist arrest?
it seemed that he was going
Then
to seize this
there's no
opportunity
need
to
to be
beat
merciful.
him to death. The owner of the Bluestone
YG,
district,
who had
lord,
transformed in an
Huaishir
instant,
was dumbfounded.
was still holding a
She
toothbrush
almost
and a
spat out
toothbrush cup
the
in her
mouthful
hand
of water
and
in
a
her
phone
mouth.
that hadn't been hung up
He
on
had
her
never
neck
seen such a
when she
unique
walked out of
train
the
of thought.
bathroom.
It's
She
fine
saw
if you
a
insist
strange
on
man
resisting arrest,
who was as
but
tall as a
who was the
mountain?
one who showed mercy?
There was also a
Could
messy
this be
room.
some kind of traditional
Excuse me,
Ingzhou
what's the
art
matter?
monologue? He
It
sighed
was called
helplessly.
Luoyu, right? If I've
But
offended
then
you in any way,
there was a
just
strange
say it.
sound in the air.
Why do you have to
An invisible
shovel back
force
and forth
twisted
on your mother's
and formed
grave like
a thick
this?
rope? No
It
one
instantly
responded.
contracted
Only
inward,
in the rustling
finding
dust.
Huaishir within.
An iron rod
Outside
that seemed
the
to be
door,
more than a
the
meter
skinny
long
ascendant
chopped
raised
down
her eyes
on the head of the weak,
She raised her
helpless,
hand
and pitiful
pulled
Miss
on the origin
YG.
substance rope.
It was the
Then,
10 hands,
a blinding
with sharp
electric
edges
current
and
shot up
corners
from the rope,
although the
flowing
length was
into
exaggerated
Huaishir's body.
compared to the
Numb.
ordinary 10 hands. Remember, with the
I
height
am the
and size of the
director
person
of the
who
looming
came,
hall,
it didn't
Minajima
make people
Tadako,
feel any sense
the
of
owner of the
disharmony.
Bluestone
It
district,
didn't matter if
raised
it was
her
called an
hands with a
iron
sinister
ruler
smile
or a ryukyu
her 10 hands
trident.
clenched.
In any
and
case,
a dark green,
any kind
all
of weapon
suddenly
in the
popped
hands of
out
such
of
a
the
giant
hand
would become
in
an
midair.
out-and-out murder
Her
weapon.
arms suddenly
It was clearly a
expanded by
weapon
another
used to catch
30%.
criminals and avoid
A
harming their
terrifying
lives.
force erupted,
But when he made a
breaking
move
through the limit,
he mercilessly
and smashing
aimed at
down
a
on
fatal
the skull
position.
of
In the
Huaishir
loud
Suko,
roar,
secret
Huaishir
instrument,
sighed
Jingang
and raised
force.
his eyes.
At that
He
moment,
looked down at the
Huaishir
cup
lowered
and
his
toothbrush
eyes
in
and
his
sighed
hand, took a step to the right,
What?
and barely
Jiao
avoided
Shan
the
turned
10
around in
hands that
shock,
could split steel.
glaring at his colleague
Then
behind
he took
him.
a step forward.
The people of
He
the looming
raised the
hall
cup and
went
splashed
over
the mouthwash
when?
on the face of
Just
the person
now.
who
Mao Yi
came.
replied.
It didn't look
As the
like
8-hound
he had a
warriors,
girlfriend.
You let them do as they
Huaishir was
please.
merciful
Jiao Shan was
and used
furious.
the mouthwash of
This
a beautiful
is the
girl
Rigian
to wash his
family.
face.
Where do you
In
place
a hurry,
the name and
the giant
dignity
man
of the
dressed
Rigian family
as a monk suddenly
the
lowered
Rigian
his
family
head, and his
What
bamboo
Rigian
hat
family?
blocked
Right
all the
now,
splashing water.
it's just
But
meat on
before
the
he
plates
could
of
raise his
ministers
face,
and warriors.
then he saw a
Mao Yi
toothbrush
sneered.
with toothpaste
Don't
foam
you understand?
poking straight
Jiao Shan?
at his eyeball.
This so-called
it was
trial
as
of the
fast as
imperial
lightning.
chef and demon
In the
is
shrill
just
howl,
treating us
it was
like
already
food.
close.
At this
In
time,
the end, it
does
stopped
anyone
abruptly,
still care about the
hovering
name
in
of the
front of the
8-hound
newcomer's
warriors?
eyes. He glanced
Huaishir's
at the
little
ashen
finger
faced
flicked the
Jiao Shan,
toothbrush handle
shaking his
slightly
head
and
splashing
sighing.
some toothpaste
You're just a
foam
dog
into the
left
newcomer's eyes.
and right. Wash your
The
eyes.
employer has
friend.
changed.
Learn to
Huaishir
read
retracted
the
his
atmosphere
arm, tilted
early.
his head back,
Lord Jiao
and
Shan.
poured the last bit
Jiao
of water
Shan's
into
face
his
was
throat.
ashen.
Then
The veins
he began
on his
to rinse
hand
his mouth.
protruding from the
The
hilt of
giant
his sword.
monk roared.
The so-called
furiously.
warriors are the
His
oxen
face
and
was
horses
ashen.
under the Lord.
In a literal sense,
Mao Yi,
it was ashen.
haven't you thought about
Soon,
why your new
his
employer
entire
would like
body
a dog that
seemed to
betrays
have
its
turned
master?
indigo in
Get
his
out of
fury.
my way.
He looked
Jiao
like a
Shan
guardian in a
glanced
temple.
at him indifferently for the last time.
Jiao Shan knocked away Mao Yi, who was blocking his way, and rushed to the courtyard where Huaishir was. It's too late. They've already left. Mao Yi shook his head mockingly. But that miss
He looked over with a
is
gloomy
really
gaze,
a beauty, with a
It's
trace
understandable
of pity. That
it
Jiao
was
Shan minister
as
is
if he
so
was
worried
looking at an
Jiao
idiot.
Shan's footsteps
You still
paused.
haven't
figured out who you should be worried about. Are you worried about that unfathomable demon from the abyss, or the other dogs of your new master? Being looked at like that, Mao Yi fell into a daze. Suddenly, he felt a trace of uneasiness. Just like what Mao Yi had said, when they arrived, it was already too late. The entire courtyard was a mess. Zhen Shi, who had finally returned to sleep, was sitting on a chair and drinking tea to calm herself down. There were continuous loud noises coming from the house behind her. Are you okay, Zhen Shi? Jiao Shan bent down and held her shoulder. After looking at her for a moment, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. Mao Yi was already impatient. Where's Huaishir? Where's Huaishir? Zhen Shi raised her hand with a complicated expression and pointed inside the house. The dull, loud noises were getting clearer and clearer. Jiao Shan
and Mao Yi looked at each other. Their expressions were getting more and more complicated. When they walked in, they heard more and more miserable screams. "Don't hit me. I'm wrong. I admit it. Don't hit me." A burly man as big as a mountain was lying on the ground, kowtowing loudly. He screamed and cried. "Please let me go, Miss Huaiji. I don't know anything." Behind him, a half-dead and skinny sublimator was hanging on the beam. He was foaming at the mouth and had already lost consciousness. "Did I ask you to stop? Continue." Motoko Huaiji flew up and kicked his head. She scolded. "You know why you're an idiot? It's because you usually slack off in the temple and don't kowtow. Now you're making up for it. You can't miss a day or a day's worth. This is what happens when you slack off." Then Mao Yi saw that the elite of the Middle Prefectural Office, the tough man known as the Ironworks Master, actually continued to kowtow without even frowning. Even after smashing through the floor and smashing his head in front of the broken steel bars and stones, he didn't dare to stop. Silence. In the dead silence, there was only the sound of continuous kowtowing. In the midst of the loud noise, Huaisha turned around and smiled at Jiaoshan. "You guys came at the right time. The real murderer who killed Riken Nobuyuki has been found. His Weibo name is Dai Dai Xiao. Cough, cough. Anyway, hurry up and take him down." As he spoke, he even kicked the master of the Ironworks Master beside him. "Speak. Who's the wrong murderer?" "It's me. It's me." Mitsushima Tadago cried and kowtowed. "Hurry up and take me away. I admit to my crimes. I'm the one who did it." The awkward silence came again. Jiaoshan and Mao Yi were stunned. Jiaoshan had never seen such a fantastical scene and didn't know what was going on. After seeing such a fantastical scene, Mao Yi had already begun to imagine what kind of tricks his new employer would play on him as the one who caused all this. At this point, there was only one way left. Mao Yi instinctively drew his sword. His face was ferocious. Bam! A punch came from behind and hit the back of his head. Mao Yi fainted on the spot. He didn't know if it was an accident or intentional, but that punch did make Huaisha's eyes light up. The timing and strength were just right. It was between a fatal blow and Mao Ye's tolerance limit. "I'm sorry. Although this guy is embarrassing, he's still a retainer of the Riken family. I hope you can forgive him for being rude." Jiaoshan retracted his fist and raised his hand to grab Mao Yi by the collar and threw him out of the door. "Thinking about it carefully, you guys seem to have been rude from the beginning. Don't you want to consider committing seppuku?" Huaisha pinched his chin and pondered for a moment. He suddenly remembered. "I'm sorry. Although it's rare for a guest to come, it's a bit messy here. I haven't cleaned it up yet. Please wait for me at the door. I'll make tea for you. There's no need for tea." Jiaoshan glanced indifferently at the two guys at Huaisha's feet. "However, I'm more concerned about what you've done." "I've done what a kind person should do." Huaisha shrugged. His 5 fingers opened, and wisps of ashes fell from his fingertips. "You see, sometimes to make people recognize reality, it only needs a nightmare." Jiaoshan didn't speak. His brows gradually furrowed. He didn't know what to do. Should he take down this arrogant person on the spot, or pretend that nothing happened? But no matter what, the looming hall would not let this go. Just as he was pondering, the phone in his arms suddenly rang. After connecting, his expression changed slightly. Soon, he hung up the phone. "Miss Huaisha, Master Quan Jiang wants to see you." You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.